owner of the US Mega Farm. Este video es puramente para entretenimiento y no infringe derechos de autor en los derechos de la novela y la imagen son del autor original. No reclamamos propiedad. No te gusta esperar y quieres escuchar este fanfic completo ahora. Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon, donde encontrarás los mejores fanfics. Chapter 501 Return to the villa. It was almost noon, and the alfalfa in the ranch was blown here and there by the strong wind. The sun in the sky was gradually covered by dark clouds. Kinzu and his friends met at the foot of the mountain behind the woods. Old John looked up at the sky and said with some concern, "Boss, you go back first, we just need to block this place." Kinzu held a tiger cub, looked at the wire fence that was almost finished, and nodded with a smile. "Okay, then I'll go back first, and you guys should go back and rest early after you finish." After saying goodbye to everyone one by one, Kinzu took the newly recruited bodyguards and Dale, each holding a tiger cub, and rushed to the villa. Don't say it, unknowingly, they have walked so far. Kinzu and his 3 tigers walked in the ranch for more than half an hour, and finally arrived at the door of the villa before the heavy rain came. Before he could open the door, the room was in chaos. Daha and Xiaohe were covered with sweat and stared at the big jaguar with a trembling look. From the sky, the 2 brothers deeply felt that death was so close to them. Jerry and Tom also looked terrified. Although they hadn't seen it yet, the breath of the king of the forest had already made them breathless. Dudu was a little confused. She was still young and was adopted by Kinzu early, so she was not very sensitive to these things. "Oh, my God, Clean, what did you bring back again?" Eva's helpless voice came from the villa before she arrived. When they just set out in the morning, Eva knew that her little man would definitely make some trouble. Sure enough, before the people entered the door, the house was in chaos. But when she walked out of the villa and saw the jaguar squatting at the door like a pug, she almost fainted. You pointed at Kinzu, and Eva was so excited that she couldn't speak for a long time. Kinzu was startled, put down the little guy in his hand, and quickly stepped forward to support Eva, and asked with concern, "Eva, what's wrong with you? Are you okay?" Eva leaned on Kinzu's arms and felt her legs a little weak. Especially when the jaguar looked at her with a hint of curiosity, she felt a little unsteady. Looking at Kinzu, Eva asked with a trembling voice, "How did you get a tiger back? What if it hurts someone?" Kinzu chuckled twice, turned around, and whistled at the jaguar proudly. As soon as the whistle fell, the jaguar reacted, got up quickly and ran over. Feeling Eva's body become tense, Kinzu smiled and patted her, indicating, "Look, such an honest and obedient big guy, how could he hurt someone?" Eva was a little dumbfounded, looking at the jaguar that Kinzu pinched and rubbed back and forth. She couldn't believe her eyes. "Is this still a jaguar? Okay, forget about it. Is the meal ready? I'm starving." Kinzu walked into the house with Eva in his arms, touched his stomach and changed the subject. "Of course, it's ready, you can eat." Eva looked back with lingering fear. Fortunately, the big guy was resting under the porch and didn't follow him in. "Uncle, you're back." As soon as he entered the villa, Shirley came over with a hop, looked outside with some curiosity, and asked, "What's that outside? It's so big." Kinzu smiled and touched the little girl's head. "That's a tiger, haven't you seen it on TV?" Shirley thought about it with some doubts, nodded first, and then shook her head. "I have seen it, but the tiger I saw is different from this." Kinzu was amused by the cute actions of the little girl. "Eat first, and after dinner, Uncle will take you to see the big tiger." Nodding excitedly, Shirley sat at the dining table and waited for dinner. Kinzu was very miserable and started to prepare food for the little guys. The rest were easy to deal with, except for Da Husky and Xiao Husky. They might have been frightened by the jaguar today, and they looked depressed. "What's wrong? Are you shocked?" Kinzu smiled and rubbed the heads of the 2 guys. It seemed that what Kinzu said hit the nail on the head. The 2 little huskies came to Kinzu, turned over their bellies and started to whack coquettishly. Kinzu took the opportunity to scratch the 2 little guys, helped them loosen their bones, and smiled and comforted them. Okay, go eat quickly, you are still young, you will be fine when you grow up." The 2 little guys climbed up, wagged their tails and went to fetch the food bowls. With their positive look, how could you tell that they were still sentimental just now? Damn, I was fooled again. Kinzu rolled his eyes, ignored the 2 little guys who only knew how to pretend to be cute, got up and went to the kitchen to get food for the jaguar. Since he is already a regular employee, he will definitely get the same benefits as he deserves. Holding a large piece of beef, Kinzu felt a little distressed. Damn, this is all money. If he continues to feed him like this, the landlord will have no more food. But now is not the time to feel distressed. He has just joined the group, so he must not be scared away. Taking out the beef and a large basin, Kinzu took the guys directly to the pergola. When the jaguar saw Kinzu coming out, he stood up quickly, shook his feathers, and looked like a good baby. Kinzu rolled his eyes and threw the beef into the basin. Eat it quickly, let me see how big your appetite is. The jaguar was not polite, opened his bloody mouth, and bit the beef. The two little tiger cubs next to him were a little greedy, so they ran over to join in the fun. After saying hello to the big guys, Kinzu bent down and picked up the little guy who wanted to join in the fun. Let's go to the house to eat. Now is not a good time for you to eat meat. The little guys who were a little panicked at first miraculously calmed down after hearing Kinzu's words. After entering the villa, he put the two little guys on the sofa. Looking at the little tiger who was like a good baby, Kinzu began to ponder. Can an untamed wild animal understand what I say? Just as he was thinking, he was interrupted by Shirley's voice. Wow, uncle, what is this? So cute. Shirley took a fancy to the two little guys that Kinzu put down at first sight, and ran over to jump. Hearing Shirley's question, Eva, who had just walked out of the kitchen, was also a little curious. What kind of thing could be cute? Eva shifted her sight, and when she saw the two little guys on the sofa, her eyes suddenly became a little heart-shaped. Clean, is this a leopard cat, or what? Chapter 502 Naming and Arrival. Kinzu raised his eyebrows proudly, but did not say it directly. Instead, he said, no, guess. Eva dragged her chin, looked out the door thoughtfully, and asked with doubt. Could it be a little tiger? That shouldn't be the case. How could you catch a little tiger? Kinzu blinked. I can't catch it, but the big tiger thought it was good to follow me, so he brought the little tiger with him. Eva looked at Kinzu speechlessly, not knowing what to say. Is there such a thing? Shirley ignored the conversation between the two. After getting off the dining table, she stepped on her little legs and trotted to the sofa like a gust of wind. Squatting on the ground, the little girl looked at the two furry little tiger cubs carefully, wanting to reach out and touch them but not daring to. Seeing this, Kinzu smiled and squatted down, picked up a little tiger that was a little nervous, and put it in front of the little girl. It's okay, they don't bite. Shirley nodded her head happily, stretched out her little hand, and tentatively pressed it on the little tiger. Being pressed by the little girl, the little tiger struggled a little bit and made a sound like a kitten. Looking at such a cute little tiger, the little girl's heart seemed to melt. She gently stroked it, fearing that she would scare the little guy. Eva walked over gently and looked at the other little tiger in Kinzu's hand, with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Kinzu smiled helplessly. Good guy, it seems that no matter how old a woman is, she likes this cute little animal. It's no wonder that those leopard cats are so popular. Handing over the little tiger in his hand, Kinzu stood up and said, you guys should come and eat quickly, the food will be cold soon. The two women agreed absent-mindedly, and then stared at the little tiger in their hands. Eva also took out her mobile phone and took a few selfies, which was just like the temperament of a little fangirl. Kinzu shrugged helplessly and looked at Dale next to him. It's better for this girl. She won't be crazy. After lunch, Kinzu moved a recliner and sat under the porch, watching the rain outside and sipping tea leisurely. Shirley brought a small stool and sat next to Kinzu, with Daha and Xiaohe lying next to them. Of course, the cute little tiger was indispensable. Uncle, let's give them a name. Shirley took her little hand away from the little tiger and looked at Kinzu expectantly. Kinzu heard this and came back to his senses from his contemplation, and said with a smile, okay, little girl, what should we call them? Shirley propped up her little chin and fell into deep thought, still mumbling in her mouth, what should we call them? Darwin. Or Xiaohuang. Kinzu's forehead had a few black lines, and it felt that this girl's naming level was comparable to his own. After thinking for a long time, the little girl still had no clue. She scratched her pigtails and her two big eyes scanned unconsciously. After seeing the big guy lying next to her, the little girl's eyes suddenly lit up. She turned her head to look at Kinzu and asked expectantly, Uncle, you said they are tigers, so why don't we call them Big Tiger and Little Tiger? Kinzu nodded indifferently, smiled and touched the little girl's head. Okay, whatever you say is what it is. Shirley cheered excitedly. The little girl was very happy that Kinzu could agree with her opinion. But when she turned around and looked at the two little tigers who were almost the same and both had leopard prints, she became embarrassed again. Looking at Kinzu eagerly, the little girl looked a little tangled. Uncle, which one of them do you think is the older brother? Which one is the younger brother? Kinzu was a little at a loss for words. How could I know which one of them was bigger? Besides, I didn't even know whether they were male or female. Putting down the teacup, Kinzu reached out and took the little tiger. As its four little paws pushed and resisted, he violently separated its legs. The little guy let out a wail. What kind of person is this? My chastity. After a moment, Kinzu proudly announced to the little girl with a strange look on his face that the two guys were both male. Now that the gender has been determined, the next step is to determine the size. This time it was easier. Kinzu just picked them up casually, felt the weight, and then pointed to the smaller one. Well, this is the older brother, and the one over there is the younger brother. The little girl didn't know Kinzu's bad taste. She held the little tiger in her hand and asked excitedly, Uncle, then this is the big tiger? Kinzu nodded seriously. Well, this is the big tiger. By the way, go ask your sister Eva to help you find a rope to mark the big tiger. After the little girl and Eva entered the villa, Kinzu picked up the teacup again, looked at the big tiger next to him, and began to think about it. Your children now have names, so you should have one too, right? Kinzu waved his hand, and the jaguar stood up lazily, shook his darker yellow-brown fur, and walked to Kinzu with elegant steps. Lie down and turn over. Kinzu's order was concise and to the point. The jaguar didn't think much about it and did as he was told. Of course, it was taking a nap just now and didn't see what happened to its child, otherwise it wouldn't have been so obedient. While the big guy was not prepared, Kinzu grabbed its two hind legs and twisted them to the side. The jaguar was stunned, really stunned. What was he doing? He jumped up and just wanted to retract his thighs, but Kinzu glared at him fiercely. What are you doing? Lie down and don't move unless you were told to. The jaguar was so aggrieved. How unlucky was he? Didn't he just want to find a better place for his child to live? How come he was captured alive just after arriving at the destination, and now he has to suffer this kind of injustice? If he could speak, this guy would probably cry and make a scene and want to hang himself. Kinzu ignored the guy's embarrassment and smiled with satisfaction after verifying his guess. Not bad, it's a male tiger. It seems that in a few years, I can open a tiger park myself. Before he finished being intoxicated, the mobile phone on the small table next to him rang. Hi, Clean, we're at the gate of your ranch. Hearing the familiar voice coming from the microphone, Kinzu smiled and said, What are you waiting for, buddy, coming quickly. After hanging up the phone, Kinzu looked at the ranch in the rain, and felt that his soul seemed to have been washed. Just as Kinzu's thoughts were flying, several small cars drove in outside the ranch one after another. The clear blue logo on the body of the car indicated their identity, Guinness World Records, Boston Branch. Chapter 503 Grow. A moment later, the motorcade arrived at the gate of the villa. At Kinzu's signal, everyone parked the car and got out. Hi, Mr. Clean, we'll meet again so soon. William gave Kinzu a big hug as soon as he came up, and he seemed particularly enthusiastic. Kinzu hugged him gently, and then quickly pulled away, cursing this dead gay in his heart, but complimented him. Mr. William is polite, I have to trouble you again this time. The two of them greeted each other and walked towards the villa. As soon as they entered the gate, William's footsteps paused, and the whole person froze there, and said in a trembling voice, Old Tiger Clean, how can you have a tiger here? Kinzu followed William's gaze and saw that the jaguar had stood up. At this moment, it was protecting Shirley and the little tiger behind it, staring at the door with its teeth bared. It is estimated that if it hadn't been for Kinzu's previous instructions, it would have pounced on it now. It was not until he saw Kinzu that the big guy's expression relaxed a little, and he lay down lazily again. Ahem, well, William, you're not right. This guy is like this when he sees strangers. Come, let's go this way. Kinzu led the way and walked into the villa with the trembling group. William wanted to turn around and leave at this moment, especially when he passed by the big tiger. He felt that his breathing was about to stagnate. This is not one of those artificially domesticated little tigers. The height and length of this guy just stood up. William felt that it was the biggest he had ever seen with his own eyes. After finally moving into the villa, William's tense nerves suddenly relaxed, and he sat limply on a sofa, breathing heavily. Kinzu found it funny watching from the side and couldn't help but teasing, William, you're a certification officer of Guinness. You wouldn't be that afraid of tigers, right? William rolled his eyes and muttered dissatisfiedly, "Is there any difference between being a certification officer of Guinness and being afraid of tigers like me?" "Of course there is." Kinzu took the tea brought by Eva and made a cup for William and several followers. Then he said with a smile, "Look, what you come into contact with every day are the most famous or only things in the world. You must have come into contact with a lot of tigers." William nodded, took a sip of tea, and couldn't help but praise, "Very good tea." Then this guy shrugged his shoulders and said helplessly, "Clean, you have to know that Guinness has more than one certification officer like me, and it just so happens that I'm not in charge of animals." Kinzu was a little enlightened, and then teased, "So, you're still afraid of tigers?" "Nonsense, how many normal people are not afraid of tigers?" William muttered dissatisfiedly. Kinzu was embarrassed, and it seemed that he was also afraid. He was not afraid, but it did not mean that others were not afraid. As if to cover up the embarrassment, he coughed twice and went straight to the point, asking, "Mr. Clean, when can we go to see those two big guys?" To be honest, if William had not just come a few days ago, he would not believe that there are such big bluefin tuna in the world. Even some guys in the company were discussing whether there would be any problems with this verification. After all, they had just identified the world's largest bluefin tuna a few days ago, and now there is another one. Oh no, there are several larger bluefin tuna. So, William pointed to the white man next to him who had remained silent and introduced, "Mr. Clean, this is also our Boston area certification officer, Mr. Grow." Kinzu was a little confused. What does it mean, the identification officer has changed? William did not explain, but just gestured to him, and then bowed his head and remained silent. "Hello, Mr. Grow, welcome to Tycoon Manor. I hope there will be a good result later." Kinzu greeted Grow with a smile on his face. Contrary to Kinzu's expectation, Grow didn't seem to be excited about these. He shook hands with Kinzu lightly, stood up, and asked in an inquiring tone, "Mr. Clean, how about we go now, get it done earlier and finish work earlier?" Kinzu nodded, and glanced at William next to him in some confusion. What is this guy doing? He led everyone to the dock with an umbrella, and just saw Will inspecting the dog, so he smiled and greeted him. "Will, how is it? Didn't you get wet this morning?" Will turned around and said with a smile, "Boss, don't worry, no one got wet. Are you okay later?" Kinzu shook his head. "We went home early in the morning." After saying that, he seemed to remember something, slapped his head, looked at the people behind him apologetically, and quickly introduced himself to both parties. "Mr. Clean, let's get down to business first." Looking at the continuous drizzle, Grow frowned a little. He didn't want to come here. No matter whether this guy's bluefin tuna was caught at the beginning or just caught now. As long as the size and weight are similar, it means there is no problem. But this time, I don't know which big guy is behind the scenes to add fuel to the fire and actually send him down. Kinzu was urged by this guy again and again, which made him a little angry. His face turned serious and pointed to the fish tank with small fish. "The bluefin tuna is in there. You can go in and take a look first." Grow didn't say anything nonsense. Under everyone's gaze, he walked in with his head held high. Kinzu didn't move, but winked at Will next to him, motioning him to go over and see the situation. After everyone went in, Kinzu looked at William with a wry smile. "I say, who is this guy? What's going on with you guys?" William also shrugged and muttered a little unhappy. "Isn't it because of you?" "My reason?" Kinzu felt more and more surprised. "Yeah." Mr. William nodded and explained. In such a short time, the previous world record was overturned. Those guys in the company thought that I had received some benefits from it, so they sent this guy here when they were about to come. "I'll bring such a person." Kinzu wanted to curse. "It's just a world record for me to certify. Is it that difficult?" William shrugged helplessly. "There's no way. You can only wait for the result with peace of mind." Just as William said, Kinzu has done everything he can do now, and can only wait for the results. Moreover, these guys seem to be doing things against Kinzu, testing and checking inside. Will next to him rolled his eyes. "Fortunately, it is dead. If it was alive, it would fall apart after being tossed around like this by you." About half an hour later, just when Kinzu was getting anxious, Will came back with Grow and a few others. As soon as they met, Kinzu couldn't wait to ask, "How is it? Mr. Grow, is my bluefin tuna up to standard?" Chapter 504. Let's call him White Tiger. Grow nodded in amazement. To be honest, it was the first time he had seen such a big fish, and it was a bluefin tuna that was as valuable as gold. especially when he thought of the auction price of the last bluefin tuna. Gro was extremely jealous of the luck of the Chinese man in front of him. Mr. Clean, congratulations, your bluefin tuna has successfully passed the review. We will send you the relevant certificate within 3 working days. Qin curled his lips. 3 more working days. But he smiled and thanked him. Thank you so much, Mr. Gro. If you have nothing to do in the evening, why don't you have dinner at the ranch before leaving? No, thank you for your kindness, Mr. Clean. We have something else to do in the afternoon, so we won't bother you too much. Gro smiled politely and left with the helpless William and others. When the car drove away, Will came over and asked in confusion, "Boss, this guy's attitude is not very friendly. Just now, he looked like he wished our fish was fake." Qin shrugged, smiled and patted Will on the shoulder. "Okay, Will, anyway, we have achieved our goal, right?" Will nodded, looking at the jaguar under the villa's porch, and said with some envy, "I really can't understand why this guy is so honest. Boss, you're really awesome." Qin raised his eyebrows proudly. "Of course, don't you look at who I am." "Okay, I know, you're the boss, okay." Will smiled helplessly, turned around and walked towards the dock, where there were 2 bluefin tuna worth tens of millions, and he couldn't help but pay attention. Qin sat back under the porch, took out his mobile phone and called Chen. It rang twice before it was picked up. "Boss, is there any good news again?" Chen's voice sounded very happy, with a feeling of spring breeze. It's no wonder. Although the bluefin tuna has been sold, there is still an endless stream of customers coming to the restaurant. The whole restaurant has no time to rest. He has already considered the expansion of the restaurant and the issue of the signature chef. Of course, he has not forgotten what brought all this, so he has become more concerned about the remaining 2 bluefin tuna. Qin smiled, knowing that he was anxious, so he didn't keep him in suspense and said directly, "You guessed right, the Guinness people have been here just now, but it will take 2 or 3 days to get the certificate. You can build momentum first." "Really? It's done so quickly." Chen excitedly slapped the table and stood up. Qin curled his lips indifferently. "What's so fast?" "This is not fast. I don't know what the Guinness certification officer wants to do this time. He clearly brought the certificate with him, but he said he didn't bring it with him and would send it back in 2 or 3 days. Chen was also a little confused after hearing this, but his excitement made him not think too much. Instead, he comforted him. "Boss, it's nothing. It's just 2 or 3 days. It doesn't matter. We can promote it first." After a pause, Chen thought of those guys who had just returned to the island country. He laughed evilly and said, "Now those little Japanese will be anxious. I hope they can sleep well today." Qin hung up the phone, thinking about what Chen said just now, and shook his head. Although losing the world's #1 brand will make those islanders lose some, they won't lose too much. After all, it's not the world's #1, but it's still the world's 3rd. Thinking of this, Qin regretted it a little. It would be great if he had brought a few more at the beginning, so that they would lose all their money. Luxury goods like these are actually mainly for their reputation. If we really talk about the taste, what can you really taste from a small piece? Qin threw his phone aside and lay on the recline without thinking too much. What happened is in the past, and there is no use regretting. It seems that after handing these 2 bluefin tuna to Chen tomorrow, he will go out to sea as soon as possible. It is not a good thing to be idle all day. Take advantage of the last month to get more and ensure the normal supply of these luxury seafood in the restaurant. Turning his head to look at the jaguar next to him, Qin smacked his dry lips. In fact, tiger meat is also very good. As if aware of Qin's ill intentions, the jaguar shuddered and climbed up at once. Looking at Qin's flickering eyes, the big guy whimpered in fear, and slipped into the villa with his tail between his legs, causing Eva in the villa to scream loudly. "No, no, oh my god, Qin, get this guy out." Eva ran out by foot in a panic. She loved the little tiger, but she couldn't stop yelling at such a big guy. Qin laughed evilly, looked at the panicked Eva, stood up and walked inside, and teased. "No way, our famous cowgirl would be afraid of a tiger." Eva twisted Qin angrily and muttered, "Who said cowboys can't be afraid of tigers?" "I'm afraid, what's wrong with you?" Qin rolled his eyes. "Why does it feel that this girl is getting more and more violent? Well, she must be in need of discipline." Qin thought so in his heart, and his eyes couldn't help but wander. Looking at the proud Kurds swaying in front of him, Qin's anger gradually grew. After noticing Qin's strangeness, Eva's heart was in a mess. She stepped back several steps. When she felt safe, she looked at Kinzu Itsamanga. It's broad daylight. Shirley is watching us. What do you want to do? Kinzu thought so too. He couldn't indulge in lust in broad daylight every day, right? So he pretended not to understand and looked at Eva and asked, "What did you say? What do you want to do?" Eva was choked. Looking at the smug smile on Kinzu's mouth, she stamped her feet in dissatisfaction and simply sat next to Shirley, ignoring this guy. Kinzu smiled smugly. "You little guy, you want to fight me? Wait until night and see how I will deal with you." He whistled at the big tiger and waved his hand, signaling it to come over. The jaguar looked at Kinzu and didn't want to go over, but he had no choice because he was now living under someone else's roof. He could only move to Kinzu's side step by step with grievance. Kinzu slapped the guy on the head in a bad mood, and scolded him with a smile. "You coward, look at you like a bear, I haven't thought about what to do yet." Looking at the big guy in front of him who looked like a pitiful little thing, Kinzu scratched his head. "Your sons are called Yeo and Xiaoyu, so what should you be called?" After thinking for a long time, Kinzu suddenly remembered his big alligator turtle. He slapped his thigh and looked at the big guy in front of him, laughing. "Since it is called Chuan, then you can be called Bearu." Thanks to the two big guys, 10 years old Worm and Zunlan, for their rewards and support, and thanks to Wen QM for the 500 starting coins reward. Ahem, whoever said that the author was incompetent in naming, stand up, I promise not to hit you. Don't you know that we are still good friends if we see through but don't say it? Chapter 505 Yamamoto Taro, the big jaguar, oh no, it should be called the white tiger now, had no idea that it had a very incongruous name. Seeing Kinzu laughing, it relaxed a lot and whimpered, celebrating that it had escaped from danger and that it had been promoted from a jaguar to a white tiger. Eva next to him covered her face. My goodness, how could she not see that there was any white on the body of this big tiger? Looking at Eva's little eyes next to him, Kinzu felt itchy in his heart and wished that it would be night immediately. But when he looked at the time, it was not even 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Shirley next to him looked at Kinzu curiously, not understanding why his expression was so strange. "Uncle, are you feeling unwell? Do you want to see a doctor?" Kinzu's expression froze. Looking at the curious and innocent eyes of the little girl, the anger in his heart inexplicably disappeared a lot. "No, Uncle is very good. I just named the big tiger and I'm happy." Shirley became interested and ran over curiously. She snuggled in Kinzu's arms, looked at the big tiger not far away, and asked, "Uncle, what is it called now?" "White tiger." Kinzu answered firmly, "White tiger." "Why? Isn't it white?" The little girl was a little confused. This? Kinzu hesitated for a long time, not knowing how to explain. Finally, under the little girl's increasingly curious eyes, he began to tell her the story of the 4 protective beasts that have been passed down in China since ancient times. Not to mention the little girl, even Eva and Dale next to them were fascinated by the story. The way they listened to the story attentively gave Kinzu extra motivation. In Kinzu's narration, the 3 women also had some impressions of the 4 great beasts of China. Eva sighed and said, "What a magical country. I think I should go and have a look." Dale nodded in agreement, and said, "Yes, and the people are pretty good." Kinzu was a little proud when he heard that, but then he heard Dale continue, "But that was a few years ago. I don't know if she is doing well now." Kinzu suddenly became a little depressed. It seems that this girl is praising someone else. Looking at the 3 women, 1 young and 2 big, who started discussing the story of the mythical beast in China, and through him, who had just let the topic aside, Kinzu felt indescribably depressed. But there is a saying. If you can't get in, then force it in. Kinzu thought so and did so. So he shamelessly squeezed in between the few people, holding Eva on the left and putting in Lushan's claw on Dale's little butt on the right. For a moment, the atmosphere in the room became a little ambiguous. But in front of Shirley, Kinzu didn't dare to do anything too much, so he could only take advantage of what was in his hand. After a long wait, with Kinzu full of resentment, the time finally came to 8 o'clock in the evening. After Kinzu finally coaxed the little girl to sleep, he slipped into Eva's bedroom in a pair of shorts. In the room, Eva looked at him with a smile, no longer worried about the day, and opened her arms waiting for Kinzu to ravage her. While Kinzu was proudly starting to win glory for his country, on an unfamiliar coastline, several speedboats were waiting and ready to set off. The rain was falling. The air was filled with a depressing atmosphere. On the shore, a short man looked at Yamamoto Taro in front of him, who was dressed in a tight suit, and said in a low voice, "Yamamoto-kun, it's up to you today. You must get the thing. Even if you can't get it, you must destroy it. Hey, please rest assured, Yamamoto will complete the task." Yamamoto Taro bowed and turned to get on the speedboat. Watching the speedboats going away, the short man on the shore had a ferocious look on his face. "The Chinese are indeed cunning, you guys deserve to die." On the speedboat, Yamamoto Taro looked at his subordinates and nodded with satisfaction. These were all elites he selected from the team. For this mission, he felt that using these people was really a waste of talent. It was just a Chinese, and there was no need for such a big battle. However, although this was the boss's instruction, although he didn't understand why the boss was so afraid of the Chinese, he still did it according to the boss's instructions. The room in the villa was full of fragrance. Just when Kinzu was sweating profusely and was sprinting in a series of sprints, about to reach the fairyland, a crisp gunshot made him collapse instantly. Fuck, who fired the gun? Kinzu got up in anger, quickly put on his clothes, and cursed viciously. Eva's reaction was much faster than Kinzu. She quickly put on her pajamas, opened the gun cabinet and took out 2 guns. Although she had already been satisfied and was not in as bad a mood as Kinzu, the expression on her face was also a little solemn. Kinzu had just put on his clothes when there was a knock on the door. Dale's voice came through the door. "Boss, there are gunshots coming from the dock. I'll go over and take a look. Stay in the house and don't come out." Kinzu was about to say something when he heard another series of gunshots outside, as if there was a fierce exchange of fire. Dale's tone suddenly became a little hurried, and she quickly said, "Boss, call the police first. Remember, don't come out." As soon as the voice fell, there was a burst of hurried footsteps at the door. Obviously, the girl had already run downstairs. Kinzu took out his mobile phone and called Stella angrily. As soon as the call was connected, Kinzu could not wait to yell, "Director Stella, has the security in the United States become so chaotic now? Or are you just taking the taxpayers' money and not doing your job properly?" Stella, who was still a little confused, was immediately awakened from his sleep. He remembered the voice of this gentleman clearly. Who had provoked him again? Rubbing his head with a headache, Stella asked carefully, "Mr. Clean, calm down first. What's the situation now? What's going on?" "I don't know what's going on." Kinzu stopped the increasingly fierce gunfire outside with some annoyance and cursed. "I only know that a gunfight has broken out in my manor, and it's very intense. Can't you hear the sound over here?" It's not that Stella couldn't hear it, but he didn't take it seriously. He thought it was the sound of the TV. After hearing what Kinzu said, he was frightened and quickly got out of bed, saying anxiously, "Mr. Clean, don't worry, I'll call someone over right away. We'll be there in 5 minutes, no, 3 minutes." After hanging up the phone, Stella put on her clothes while calling her subordinates. "Damn it, what are you doing? Can't you hear such a loud gunshot? Send the police, hurry up and send the police to me. A new week, please subscribe and vote." Chapter 506 Murder on a Rainy Night. Without mentioning the chaotic Revere Police Department, after Kinzu hung up the phone, he thought of Shirley in the room, and his heart suddenly jumped. He didn't care about Dale's explanation, and rushed into his bedroom with Eva with weapons. Fortunately, the little girl was not awakened by the gunshots and was still sleeping sweetly. Just as he breathed a sigh of relief, the phone rang again. Kinzu quickly covered the phone and went to the window, trying to stay away from Shirley. "Boss, are you okay? What happened?" Old John's voice came through the microphone, accompanied by bursts of noise and car sounds. "I'm fine, I don't know what happened at the dock. Dale has already gone there. I was just about to call and ask." Kinzu rubbed his temples. He opened the curtains a little. From here, he could see the flames flying from the dock from time to time. It was obvious that the scene was very intense. "We'll be at the dock soon. I'll go take a look first." Old John hung up the phone without waiting for Kinzu to speak again. Looking at Ryan, who was driving next to him and Real in the back seat, Old John opened the safety of his gun and said, "Something happened at the dock. We don't know the details yet. Let's go over there and take a look." Ryan said nothing more. He turned the steering wheel and the car turned in the rain and drove towards the dock. Seeing this, a car following behind also hurriedly turned the steering wheel and followed closely. Real in the back seat fiddled with the weapon in his hand, his body trembling slightly. Looking at Old John in front, he smiled and teased, "Old John, you are so old, why are you still joining in the fun? Let's go." Old John lit a cigarette and put it in his mouth, cursing incoherently. Bullshit, how old am I? Do you believe that I can still knock you down with one punch? Seeing this, the black man raised his hands in surrender. Okay, isn't it enough if I believe it? After a few short words, the atmosphere in the car became less oppressive, and the hands of the people holding weapons were no longer trembling. After all, they were not soldiers, and they had no experience of fighting with others with guns, so they could not be expressionless like Ryan. Although they came very bravely, they were still a little scared in their hearts. Fighting could kill people. Kinzu was also a little dazed in the bedroom. Damn, you are so old, why did you come to join in the fun? Especially when he thought that his cowboys and subordinates had gone, would it be appropriate for him to stay here? But thinking about it, it was a fight with guns. Kinzu backed out. However, thinking that old John had gone, if he didn't go, these cowboys would probably look down on him, right? No, he couldn't stay any longer. Kinzu opened the gun cabinet and took out a weapon that Jennifer had sent over not long ago, the AKM assault rifle, which was an improved version of the Arkansas 47. This gun was sent to Kinzu at his request, and Jennifer took a lot of effort to help him get the procedures. Of course, to match it, Kinzu also paid enough US dollars. After changing his clothes, Kinzu held this streamlined weapon, feeling indescribably excited. He took a few more magazines and loaded them. Kinzu looked at Eva, who looked panicked, and comforted her. It's okay, I'm just going to take a look. Eva shook her head, tightly grasped Kinzu's clothes, and looked at him pitifully. No, Clean, the police will be here soon, let's wait for the police to come. Kinzu gently patted Eva's shoulder and said seriously, don't worry, I will be back soon. You should believe in Dale, she will protect me, right? Eva stopped talking. She wanted to say no, but she couldn't say it. Seeing this, Kinzu lowered his head and pecked her hot red lips lightly. Help me keep an eye on Shirley, don't wait until she wakes up and can't find anyone. Eva nodded gently, holding the weapon in her hand. In fact, she really wanted to go with Kinzu. Kinzu opened the door and just walked out of the villa. He saw Bear standing at the door, looking around with vigilant eyes. Relieved, Kinzu patted its big head with satisfaction and praised, good job, man. Roar. With a low whimper, the white tiger seemed to remind Kinzu that there was danger outside and asked it to go in quickly. Kinzu ignored its reminder, took the weapon, raised his mind, and took advantage of the cover of the night, facing the drizzle, and slowly moved towards the dog. But before he could take 2 steps, 2 dazzling car lights in the distance cut through the rain and shone on the open space in front of him. A small car turned the steering wheel quickly and stopped in front of him. Ryan held the gun, opened the car door and ran down, looking at Kinzu's dress, and asked in astonishment, Boss, what are you doing? Kinzu scratched his head and asked in confusion, I'm going to the dock to take a look, what are you doing? Ryan breathed a sigh of relief and raised the gun in his hand. Boss, don't worry, there's nothing wrong over there. Dale asked me to come here to protect the safety of the villa. Kinzu had no choice but to take the gun and return to the villa with Ryan. Sitting on the sofa in the living room, Kinzu waved at Eva at the stairs, motioning her to go back to the bedroom first, then looked at Ryan and asked, what's going on over there? Ryan put the gun aside, took a tissue to wipe the sweat from his forehead, and said a little depressed, I don't know what happened specifically. It seems that they are people from the island country. They came here by speedboat. They wanted to sneak on the boat, but we found them and shot them directly. On the boat. Kinzu was stunned, a little bit amused. Stealing the boat? Wait. Kinzu reacted immediately, staring at Ryan and asked, did Will say which boat they wanted to board? Ryan was a little puzzled, but after thinking about it, he said, it seems to be the fishing boat. From what Will said, it seems that they are not just here for the boat. Kinzu understood now. Damn, they are planning to board those 2 boats. Just as he was thinking about it, he heard the sound of sirens outside the ranch. A line of 5 police cars, braving the wind and rain, stopped at the gate of the ranch at lightning speed. The car door opened and more than a dozen fully armed policemen got out of the car. Stella listened to the crackling gunshots from afar, and her face was gloomy and a little scary. With a wave of his hand, more than a dozen fully armed policemen, holding submachine guns, led by a captain, rushed straight to the dock regardless of the raindrops hitting them. Stella looked at the dock in the distance, and she hated the troublemaker in her heart. Did he really think that we policemen were here for free? P.S. This is Leoun's first book. Some parts are really unsatisfactory. Leoun himself is also working hard, but the results are too poor now. It's not that no one reads it. This book is quite popular on pirated websites. I would like to appeal to friends who are still reading pirated books. The author is almost starving to death. Can you support the genuine books? Many books have anti-piracy chapters. Lewoon doesn't want to trouble the few genuine readers, so he has not opened them. I hope that seeing Lewoon's hard work, everyone will support the genuine books. Chapter 507 Apache R-64 The police are not freeloaders, although this is just a job in the United States, and it seems that not everyone can cook. After they joined the battlefield, the situation quickly stabilized. After the police left, Stella took 2 people into the villa. When she saw Clean, she immediately smiled. Mr. Clean, I'm really sorry for today. We will definitely investigate it strictly and give you an explanation. Clean stood up politely, shook hands with Stella, and asked them to sit down. After they sat down, Clean sighed, rubbed his temples anxiously, and said, Director Stella, I know about this, I can't blame you, but I am really worried about the security situation in Revere now. Stella felt a little embarrassed and bitter. He couldn't figure it out. He had never heard that this place was so chaotic before. How come so many vicious cases happened here after he took office for only a month? Whether the helicopter was hit and disintegrated in midair, or someone broke into the billionaire's home with a gun, this was a provocation to the Revere police. Looking at the billionaire in front of him who didn't cause much trouble but still had many disasters, Stella said seriously, Mr. Clean, please rest assured, I will definitely give you an explanation. As she was speaking, Dale supported Will and walked in through the door. Both of them were wet, especially Will, who had obvious blood on his arm. Clean looked at the blood on Will's arm and was shocked. He stood up and asked, Will, are you okay? Are you injured? Will coughed twice, smiled palely, Boss, don't worry, I'm fine, I just accidentally got bit by them. Stella saw that someone was injured, and her heart became even heavier. She picked up her phone and called the emergency center. Seeing this, Clean nodded gratefully, and then said to Will, Hold on for a while, the ambulance will be here soon. Will agreed, and then said, Boss, it can be confirmed that all the people who came are Japanese, and they are very skilled. There are a total of 10 people. Except for the 2 who were knocked down by me at the beginning, the rest of them were not seriously injured. Stella's face was a little serious, and he picked up the intercom and started shouting. After a while, the intercom rang, and the voice from it made him feel relieved. It turned out that although these guys were skilled, their weapons were mainly pistols and rifles. At the beginning, they might have taken advantage of Dale and others, but now compared with the American police with submachine guns, they were not good enough. But just in case, Stanley still called the police station, and despite the light rain, he mobilized 2 helicopters and ordered them to come quickly. Clean relaxed a little and asked, Can you confirm their purpose? Will nodded. When I found them, they had already reached the dock, and were only 1 step away from getting on the fishing boat. Clean's face turned very ugly. Damn, these little devils are really brave. Looking at the pale Will, Clean felt grateful in his heart. If he hadn't found something wrong, his loss today would be great. The ambulance came very quickly. Less than 5 minutes later, 2 ambulances arrived. 2 policemen helped the doctor and sent Will to the ambulance. Clean followed and comforted him. Will, don't worry, everything will be fine. Will smiled indifferently, It's okay, boss, don't worry, it's just a minor injury. Clean watched the ambulance go away, feeling a little amused. Why did he feel more nervous than the injured? One of the 2 ambulances took Will away directly, and the other was waiting in place as a backup. The helicopters were not slow to arrive. As soon as the ambulance drove away with its colorful lights flashing, 2 cool black helicopters roared over. After contacting Stella, they flew towards the dock with searchlights on. Stella put down the intercom, looked at Clean, who was staring at her, and shrugged, Clean, it's all thanks to you. The state has equipped us with 2 big guys, real big guys. Clean swallowed his saliva and looked at the 2 big guys in the air, drooling with envy. Although he can only be regarded as a pseudo-military fan, he still knows the famous Boeing R-64 Apache. As the main active armed helicopter of the U.S. Army, the Apache is now used and recognized by 13 countries and regions in the world. Its excellent performance and excellent actual combat performance have always been ranked first in the comprehensive ranking of armed helicopters in the world since its birth. It's just that it's all thanks to me. What's the joke? Clean looked at Stella blankly. What does this guy mean? Stella smiled and explained, it was the last helicopter explosion. The state was afraid that this would happen again, so they sent us 2 more powerful helicopters. Kinzu curled his lips. They were all excuses. The helicopter that exploded last time was not from your bureau. But it's better this way. With these 2 big helicopters, your safety should be more guaranteed, right? After all, I'm a big shot who will pay tens of millions of taxes next year. After the Apache's 30mm M230 chain machine gun opened fire, the battle was declared over. Yamamoto Taro looked at the helicopter in the air in despair, and the pain in his heart was beyond words. Thinking back to the past, he had personally driven this kind of helicopter to attack the enemy. But he didn't expect that one day, he would also become the one being attacked. Looking at his companions who were almost dead around him, Yamamoto Taro gritted his teeth and said that he couldn't just die like this. So, an hour ago, Yamamoto Taro, who had vowed to do his best for his boss, threw down his weapon and raised his hands in surrender. Seeing Taro Yamamoto surrender, the few guys who were still resisting all breathed a sigh of relief, happily dropped their weapons, and raised their hands in surrender. They had wanted to surrender for a long time, but because the boss was still insisting, they didn't have the courage. What if they just surrendered and were shot by the other side? How unfair it would be. How good it is now, everyone surrendered happily, and that joy was exactly the same as the recent popular Doraemon. Looking at the Japanese devils being escorted into the car by the fully armed police, Kinzu wanted to go with them to take a look. But looking at the time, it was almost 12 o'clock. In addition, the ranch was in a mess, so he had to give up this tempting idea. Chapter 508 Stella's Roar. Stella looked at the guys being escorted into the car, and she was so angry that her teeth were itching. It was these guys that made her unable to sleep at night. Turning to look at Kinzu, Stella said apologetically, "Mr. Clean, I have troubled you with what happened today. You should go to bed early. We will leave first." Kinzu nodded and instructed, "Chief Stella, please inform me if you have any news. I want to see who has been plotting against me." Stella agreed and got into the car. He was going to interrogate the case in person today. He also wanted to know who was preventing him from sleeping well. When the police car drove away, Kinzu, Dale and Ryan walked towards the dock together. When they arrived at the dock, Kinzu found that it was brightly lit. Old John, Real, several cowboys, Simon and the fisherman were all sitting on the ground, breathing heavily. The potholes on the ground and the yellow-orange shells scattered all over the ground proved how fierce the exchange of fire was just now. "Boss, you're here." Seeing Kinzu come in, Simon forced himself to stand up. Will was injured, so he had to take charge of the situation temporarily. "Well, is everyone okay?" Kinzu glanced around. Fortunately, although they were a little embarrassed, there were no obvious scars. Before Simon could speak, the black man Real, who looked a little excited, grinned and said, "Boss, don't worry, we're fine. They are not familiar with this place, and their weapons are not as good as ours. In addition, the police came quickly, so we are all fine." Simon nodded, "Yes, boss, fortunately the police came quickly, and we had Dale's shooting skills to suppress us, otherwise the loss today would be a bit big." Kinzu turned his head to look at Dale, only to find that the girl's clothes were still wet. Fortunately, it was night, otherwise she would have been exposed long ago. "Dale, go change your clothes first, don't catch a cold." Dale nodded gently, turned around and went back to the villa. Kinzu looked at everyone and said, "Thank you all today. I won't say more. Let's share the profits after selling these 2 big guys." As expected, money is the source of motivation, especially in the United States, a country where money is supreme. After hearing what Kinzu said, everyone who knew that Kinzu would not be stingy cheered in unison. What is the reason for fighting so hard? Isn't it just for money? It's impossible for someone to risk their life to fight those desperate people for the sake of feelings after only a few days of getting along. Kinzu sees through it very clearly, understands them very well, and will meet their needs. This is how society is. As long as someone is willing to risk his life for you, you have to give them enough rewards. Otherwise, who will help you next time? Besides, money is just a string of numbers for Kinzu now. Although there is not so much that he can't spend it all, he will not worry about not having money to spend, which is why he is not in a hurry to fish for treasure. For him, the most important thing now is to enjoy life, and it would be even better if he could make some money. Kinzu kept smiling at everyone, and after they all went back happily, he called Simon, who also wanted to go back. "Will, I just sent him to the hospital. Simon, can you take care of him tonight?" Simon nodded and said seriously, "Boss, don't worry, I'm just about to go there." He was injured to save me, otherwise, with Will's skills, how could he be injured? Kinzu let it go. He didn't care how Will was injured. How to make him recover as soon as possible was what Kinzu had to consider. In fact, what Kinzu wanted to do more was to directly exchange a drop of spiritual liquid, which was simple and affordable. But it was a bit too shocking, especially in front of the group of policemen. If he really did this, Kinzu would probably disappear mysteriously the next day. Now he can only wait for Will to stay in the hospital for a few days, and when he is discharged, he will help him heal. After arranging the trivial matters, Kinzu stayed alone with Bayu on the way back. He began to think about who was going to deal with him today. Who wanted the 2 bluefin tuna? Gradually, a person emerged in Kinzu's mind, Gro. Yes, the first target Kinzu suspected was Gro. Only he, William, and the fishermen on the ranch knew that the fish were in the ice storage of the fishing boat. But the fishermen were the first to be ruled out by Kinzu. If they wanted to take the fish away, it would be too easy. As long as they got on the fishing boat and drove the boat, they could go wherever they wanted. But correspondingly, they had to prepare to flee to the ends of the earth, because their information was on file in the American police station. The remaining 2 are William and Gro. William might be a possibility, but in Kinzu's opinion, Gro, who had been lukewarm today, was more suspicious. Especially when Gro said that it would take 2 days to get the certificate, William's face flashed with astonishment, which was enough to show that William didn't know about it. But the problem came again. According to everyone's general reflection, the people who came today spoke the island language. And judging from his height, he also looks like a dwarf from the island country. This made Kinzu a little confused. Could it be the Gro leaked the news to the Japanese? Kinzu still couldn't figure it out until he returned to the villa. Clean, are you still thinking about it? Just wait for the news from the police. Eva, who came forward after hearing the voice, looked at Kinzu's frowning brows and felt a little distressed. Kinzu came back to his senses, sat on the sofa in the living room, patted Eva's thigh, and asked with a smile, "Why haven't you gone to bed yet? Where's Shirley?" Eva shrugged and pointed upstairs. "The little girl is sleeping very soundly, she is still sleeping." Then Eva turned her head and looked at Kinzu. "You should go to bed early too, I guess there will be news tomorrow morning." Kinzu nodded, and pounced on him with a strange smile. "Why, haven't you been fed yet? Then let's continue." Eva's face suddenly turned red, and after refusing a few times, she gradually lost herself in Kinzu's teasing. Today was also a torment for her, and now she was in urgent need of venting. Kinzu had a night of unbridled love, and spent the second half of the night quite comfortably. But some people began to get restless. In the Revere police station, Stella's eyes were red, staring at Yamamoto Taro in front of her. With a snap, a thick record book was thrown fiercely on Yamamoto Taro's face by Stella. "Fuck, do you really think these nonsense can fool us, or do you think we are all fools?" Stella's voice became louder and louder, and in the end, the old face that was originally somewhat handsome became extremely hideous. Thanks to Yo 1993 and Shini and Lao Chong for the rewards, and thanks to Langzi for the 500 starting coins reward. CSS Kushanda Western Novela on Canal Distinta Mundo Fanfic Novelas, Significat Lo Descarga and Y Subir and Sinisfuetzos Invitamos Cordialmente Visitar Nuestro Canal. Mundo Fanfic Novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 509 Yamamoto Taro's Confession. Taro Yamamoto lowered his head, letting Stella's saliva spray all over his face, always holding on to a belief. "I won't speak, you bite me if you don't agree." After entering the police station, Taro Yamamoto knew that his life was not in danger. Since he couldn't die, he must abide by the spirit of Bushido. Therefore, despite Stella's roar, which was so loud that even he was scared, Taro Yamamoto was still not afraid. He was as clear as a mirror in his heart. Although the gunfight at night was fierce, he didn't kill anyone. To be honest, several people died on his side. If the court verdict is like this, it will be considered a burglary at most, and it is an attempted one. When he goes to prison, his boss will definitely be active outside, and he will have a chance to get out then. But if he opens his mouth and sells his boss now, he will still be charged with burglary. No one will be active outside then, and he doesn't know how long he will be in prison. "It looks like you're not going to confess." Stella slapped the table in a rage, and the interrogation table, which was not very sturdy to begin with, was almost broken apart by his slap. Yamamoto Taro raised his head and spoke a long paragraph in bird language, which made Stella so angry that she almost couldn't help but shoot the bastard. Do you really think I didn't hear you speak English? Now you are speaking bird language to me. Turning his head to look at the white policeman next to him who looked like a muscular man, Stella asked, Cotter, what is this guy talking about? The muscular man named Cotter frowned and said in an angry tone, this short guy said he is from the island country and wants to meet someone from their embassy. Stella sneered twice and said disdainfully, he is dreaming. After that, Stella closed the notebook in his hand and said coldly, Cotter, send this guy to the detention center for a few days. He will never get out of this life after robbing a billionaire with a gun. The next morning, when Kinzu was still confused, he received a call from Stella. Mr. Clean, I'm so sorry. We didn't interrogate them well. Those guys only admitted that they were motivated by money. Kinzu frowned, sat up and leaned against the head of the bed, rubbed his confused eyes, and yawned weakly. Motivated by money? What money? I haven't even released the news about the bluified tuna yet, and they already know about it. Stella smiled awkwardly. He knew Kinzu didn't believe this confession, because even he himself didn't believe it. Greedy for money? What a joke. Although Kinzu was very dissatisfied with the result, he felt a little guilty after listening to the fatigue in Stella's words and looking at the time. He had caused a big director to stay up all night because of what he had done, and he called early in the morning and was so servile. If he didn't know what was good for him, he would be a bad person. So, Kinzu's voice became much softer, and he smiled and said, Director Stella, I am still very grateful to you. If you hadn't come in time, I would be in real danger. Stella breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, Mr. Keen is too polite. Serving the taxpayers is what we should do. Kinzu smiled, but didn't believe these so-called nonsense. After thinking for a moment, he said, Chief Stella, I have nothing to say for bothering you all the time. After a pause, Kinzu didn't wait for Stella to speak, and continued, how about this, I see that the police cars you drove last night seem to be a little old. I will donate $100,000 to the Revere Police Department first, and you can go and buy a few new cars. After all, with good transportation tools, we can more comprehensively protect the safety of taxpayers like us, right? Stella was stunned when she heard it. She didn't expect there would be unexpected gains. She was so happy in her heart that she didn't even refuse and agreed without hesitation. After hanging up the phone, Kinzu was a little silent, lying on the bed without saying a word. Shirley, who was woken up next to him, was still a little confused. Seeing that Kinzu had hung up the phone, she asked, Uncle, what's wrong? Is it Mom? Ah? Kinzu was stunned and was awakened by the little girl's voice. He smiled and said, No, it's Uncle's friend. You can continue to sleep. It's still early. Well, then good night, Uncle. The little girl yawned, turned over and went back to sleep. Good night. Kinzu looked up at the big sun outside the window, and sweat broke out on his head. Good night at this time? Shaking his head, Kinzu got up and went to the bathroom to wash up without paying attention to the little girl. When he changed his clothes and went downstairs, he unexpectedly found Eva and Dale sitting on the sofa downstairs. Wait. Why are there 3 people on the sofa? Kinzu glanced and found something wrong. The person sitting on the sofa wasn't that Mobuka. How did she have time to come today? Nodding to Eva and Dale, Kinzu sat next to Mobuka and asked with a smile, Why do you have time to come here today? Where's Jack? Mobuka snuggled into Kinzu's arms obediently, pouted a little dissatisfied, If I don't come, will you never come to find me? Kinzu touched his nose and smiled awkwardly, Well, you know, I'm very busy. Mobuka rolled his eyes at this guy, how come he has become so thick-skinned? Stretching out her white and tender little hands to grab Kinzu's face, Mobuka smiled and pinched it, I know, you're busy picking up girls, so I didn't come to disturb you. Kinzu had just taken the milk handed over by Eva and was drinking it, and he almost spit it out. After several dry coughs, he calmed down his somewhat excited mood, and said with a wry smile, Who told you that? I don't have time to pick up girls. Before Mobuka could speak, a delicate female voice rang not far away, Master is lying, you're obviously picking up girls. Kinzu's face turned green. Who is this prodigal who dares to say that to me? Wait, Master. Kinzu turned his head stiffly, and sure enough, he saw a colorful little parrot standing on the armrest of the sofa not far away, mumbling something. You prodigal, get over here right now. Kinzu was so angry. Good fellow, are you here to ruin my show? After roaring at Heidi, Kinzu stood up and wanted to deal with this dishonest guy. Let it know that it can't tell all the truth now. Heidi shuddered with fear. The moment Kinzu stood up, the little guy flapped his wings and flew to the side to continue playing pitiful. While flying, Heidi kept muttering, "The master is bad, the master is the worst, he only knows how to bully Heidi, Heidi is so pitiful, Heidi wants her mother." Chapter 510 Mobuka's surprise. Kinzu was so upset when he heard this. He felt helpless. "This loser, when I have time, I will show you how to deal with you. Ha ha, clean, let's see how you can quibble now." Mobuka was so proud, and the expression on his face made Kinzu a little scared. What does it mean? Is this a hidden knife behind a smile? No, I have to be careful. Thinking of this, Kinzu's expression became serious, and he talked nonsense seriously. "Well, Eva, no, it's Mobuka." Kinzu's forehead was covered with cold sweat, but now that the word have been said, he can only hold on and continue. "Well, Mobuka, don't you know that this little guy has some problems with his brain, just like a husky, he is a fool." Mobuka curled his lips and looked at this guy with contempt, and said, "Make up, keep making up." Being stared at by Mobuka's contemptuous eyes, Kinzu couldn't stand it, and coughed twice, and he really felt that he couldn't make up anymore. "Okay, I didn't say anything." Mobuka rolled his eyes at this guy and didn't dwell on it. Instead, he asked, "I heard that something happened here again. What happened? Is it serious?" Kinzu shrugged his shoulders and felt a little relieved. He pretended to be very depressed and said, "I also want to know what happened. Didn't we bring back a few big bluefin tuna last time? I was thinking of keeping them for auction, but someone wanted to snatch them last night." "Ah?" Mobuka exclaimed and asked hurriedly, "Clean, did you catch the bluefin tuna that Brother Chen has?" Kinzu raised his head proudly, "How about it? Am I awesome?" Mobuka looked at Kinzu with some admiration, nodded, and agreed, "It's really awesome. I heard from my father that the best bluefin tuna was sold to the Japanese in the end." After saying this, Mobuka sighed with some disappointment. It was obvious that he felt a little sorry for not having the chance to meet the big bluefin tuna. Kinzu was a little helpless. Could it be that this girl didn't understand what he was saying? Or was it that his English had regressed and he didn't express himself clearly? "Mobuka, didn't you understand? Someone wanted to take away the bluefin tuna last night." Mobuka was stunned when he heard this, and asked uncertainly, "Bluefin tuna? Wasn't it sold? Did you take it back?" He looked at Kinzu suspiciously, and didn't expect him to be this kind of person. Kinzu's forehead was covered with several black lines. He slapped the girl hard and scolded her with a smile. "What are you thinking? Can't I catch several big bluefin tuna at a time?" Mobuka covered the painful part of the slap and curled her lips in disdain. "Do you think bluefin tuna is so easy to catch? It's so big. I don't know how lucky you are to catch one." However, looking at Kinzu with a smile, Mobuka felt guilty for some reason and asked uncertainly, "Clean, did you really catch several bluefin tuna?" Kinzu nodded affirmatively, took out his mobile phone, and flicked through a few photos in the fish tank to show the girl. After looking at the photos, Mobuka took a breath of cold air and was stunned and a little unable to recover. Kinzu was startled and asked quickly, "Hey, baby, are you okay?" "Ah?" Mobuka was suddenly awakened and screamed in panic. After she calmed down, she forced a smile and said, "Yeah. I'm fine, just a little too surprised." Kinzu shrugged and said with an exaggerated expression, "You're surprised already? When I give you 10 or 8 fish one day, won't you be so happy that you'll faint?" Mobuka rolled her eyes at Kinzu again, and then asked impatiently, "Honey, where is the bluefin tuna? Can you take me to see it?" Kinzu agreed with a smile. Just as he was about to take her there, he saw Eva coming over. "Clean, you haven't had breakfast yet, I'll just take Mobuka there." After hearing what Eva said, Kinzu also felt a little hungry, so he smiled and said, "Baby, then let your sister Eva accompany you to see it, how about it?" Mobuka nodded with a smile, without any expression of displeasure, which made Kinzu feel a little uneasy. After the two girls left together, Kinzu came to the restaurant and ate the golden fried eggs fried by Eva on both sides. He was so proud in his heart. Big foreign horses, these are authentic big foreign horses. Moreover, the two big foreign horses were both done by me, and now they met, they didn't even fight. It seems that his two-person trip is likely to come true. After happily imagining the future for a while, Kinzu took out his mobile phone again and called Chen Mu. "Hey, boss, why did you get up so early today?" Chen Mu sat in the boss chair, leisurely picked up the coffee and sipped it. But Kinzu's next words made him spit out all the coffee he had just put in his mouth. Standing up, Chen Mu walked around the office anxiously, and asked worriedly, "Boss, are you kidding? Someone robbed the manor at gunpoint yesterday, and the target was bluefin tuna. What kind of joke am I playing?" Kinzu continued helplessly. "But don't worry, the fish are fine, and the Revere police are still very efficient." Hearing that the fish were fine, Chen Mu's heart was relieved, and he sat back in the boss chair and said with a smile, "How dare they be inefficient? There is a master like you there." Kinzu rolled his eyes and scolded with a smile. "Okay, stop talking nonsense, you quickly call someone to take the fish away today." Chen Mu nodded, smiled and agreed, and then asked uncertainly, "Boss, according to what you said, Gro is definitely a person who cannot be trusted, so can I still give you his certificate?" Kinzu scratched his head when he heard this. He had never thought about this problem. He only thought about how to deal with Gro, but forgot that the guy had not issued him a certificate yet. He asked uncertainly, "There shouldn't be any problem, after all, they have all come to check it out and confirmed that it is qualified." Chen Mu shrugged, his expression somewhat helpless. After thinking for a while, he sighed and said, "How should I know, boss? I think you should call William and see if you can find a solution through him." Kinzu nodded helplessly. It seemed that this was the only way now. After hanging up the phone, Kinzu became more and more angry, and he gritted his teeth in the end. "Damn it, it's all this Gro." Kinzu can say with certainty that the news was definitely leaked by this bastard. There was no one else but him. It seems that I have to think of a way. I must teach him a lesson, otherwise it will be difficult to relieve my anger. Thanks to Davinchui Aishu for the reward of 600 starting coins. Chapter 511. Gro ran away. Just when Kinzu was thinking about how to deal with Gro, this annoying guy, a scream suddenly came from the door. Kinzu was startled. He recognized that it was Mobuka's voice. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" Kinzu ran out quickly. "Clean, where did you get this tiger? It's so scary." Mobuka pointed at the white tiger lying lazily under the porch with a horrified face, and her legs were a little weak. If it weren't for Eva's support, she might have collapsed to the ground. Kinzu breathed a sigh of relief and waved his hand. The white tiger climbed up angrily, feeling a little disapproving in his heart. If it weren't for the mistress, it would have pounced on it long ago. When the jaguar walked away, Mobuka finally breathed a sigh of relief and looked at Kinzu with some fear. "Why did you put such a guy at the door of the villa?" "I was scared to death." Kinzu smiled awkwardly, without explaining, but curiously asked, "Didn't you see it when you came in just now?" Mobuka shook her head. "She came in with Eva and Dale just now. They were chatting happily and had no time to pay attention to the things around them." After entering the villa, Kinzu briefly talked about the jaguar, and Mobuka was amazed again. "Clean, you are so amazing. It seems that there is nothing you can't do." Kinzu shrugged. "No, at least there is one thing I can't do." Eva and Mobuka were both excited. There was actually something that Kinzu himself admitted that he couldn't do. Curiously asked, "What is it?" Kinzu smirked twice, and said word by word, "Give birth to a child. TSK." The two girls gave a middle finger with disdain, lay back on the sofa, and studied their little secrets. Kinzu stood up, said hello, and came to the office he rarely came into. Sitting in his large boss chair, Kinzu turned around comfortably. He put his feet on the desk, took out his mobile phone and called William. The phone rang twice and was connected. Before Kinzu could speak, William's somewhat excited voice came into his ears. "Ha ha, Clean, you are really on time." Kinzu listened to the suppressed laughter on the phone and asked curiously, "William, it seems that you have encountered good things today, tell me about it." William smiled modestly, "There is no good thing, Clean, you think too much." Until the end, William couldn't stand Kinzu's repeated questioning, and he said proudly, "It's really nothing, it's just that I will be responsible for all the business in Boston in the future." Kinzu's heart skipped a beat, and it was just as he guessed. So he quickly asked, "What about Gro? Isn't he your boss?" Speaking of Gro, William was also a little confused, and said puzzledly, "I don't know what Gro means." He was doing well, but after receiving a phone call today, he suddenly resigned in a panic, saying that something happened at home. Kinzu was now more certain that this guy was 1200% the one who instigated others to cause trouble for him. Then do you know where he lives? Kinzu asked anxiously. William shook his head. I really don't know about this. You should be able to see that he and I have a very ordinary relationship. By the way, why are you asking about this? Kinzu said with a disappointed "oh," and smiled. I'm just asking casually. By the way, when will you send my certificate? Upon hearing this, William laughed and teased, No, Clean, I don't have your certificate here, only the 2 blue fine-tuner. If you want the certificate, you need to go to the state government. Kinzu's forehead had a few black lines, and he said unhappily, I told you, I'm waiting for this certificate. If it's 1 day late, I'll ask you to compensate for the loss. Shrugging his shoulders, William smiled and said, Don't worry, Clean, I'll have someone send it to you right away, and I won't delay you. After hanging up the phone, Kinzu curled his lips. This guy, isn't it just a promotion? Why is he so happy? However, this girl ran very fast. It's really troublesome to find him now. Holding the phone, Kinzu began to think about who to ask for help, but after thinking for a long time, he found that there seemed to be no one who was suitable to help him. It's not that they can't do it. Anyone picked out of Kinzu's address book can definitely do it. But the problem is, in that case, everyone will know that he did it. He doesn't want to give people a feeling that he is too arrogant. Besides, he is a little worried about handing such a dangerous handle to others. When he was having a headache, there was a light knock on the door. Kinzu turned his head and saw Dale, wearing a tight leather jacket, standing at the door and looking inside. Kinzu waved his hand and motioned her to come in. After Dale sat down in front of him, Kinzu smiled and asked, What's wrong? Didn't you go to see Erica? How is her recovery? Dale's face was a little tangled and hesitant, but thinking of her good sister who was pale on the hospital bed, she gritted her teeth and asked, Boss, you said last time that you know Chinese medicine, right? Kinzu's heart moved when he heard this. He was just thinking that he was short of people here, isn't this just right? Yes, what's wrong? Are you feeling uncomfortable? Kinzu's eyes were full of scrutiny, and Dale's whole body was a little tense. Looking up at Kinzu in surprise, Dale felt a sense of fighting in her heart. This kind of feeling is only felt by people who can bring her pressure, but how can her boss bring her pressure? Dale was a little confused. Is her feeling wrong? It shouldn't be, right? What's wrong? Dale, are you feeling uncomfortable? Kinzu saw that she didn't respond, so he asked again, No. Dale came back to her senses, calmed down her somewhat agitated mood, and then looked at Kinzu with a slightly pleading look. Clean, you know Erica's body, can you treat them? Kinzu raised his eyebrows, looked at Dale with some doubts, and asked, Can they be discharged now? Isn't it said that it takes 100 days to recover from a broken bone? Dale shook her head, then nodded. It's okay to be discharged, their bodies recover quickly, but what I'm afraid is that they won't be able to accept their changes after being discharged. Kinzu was silent in his heart. Once discharged, it means that they will be exposed to society and will meet all kinds of people. At the time, they will definitely attract some rumors because of their inconvenient hands and feet. I guess Dale also thought so, fearing that these passionate young women would not be able to bear it. Chapter 512 Dale's Promise. Kinzu was silent for a moment. Under Dale's nervous gaze, he lay on his back in the soft leather armchair and slowly pondered. It's not that he was unwilling to treat the injuries of those women. After all, this was decided at the beginning, and there was nothing to hesitate about. What Kinzu was worried about now was what name he should use to treat the injuries of these female special forces. Go directly to the hospital and say that he is a doctor. What a joke, not to mention whether the hospital will agree. Even if it agrees, he will sooner or later be in trouble for practicing medicine without a license. But what name should he use to bring them back to the ranch? What will their families think? For a moment, Kinzu felt a headache. Rubbing his temples, Kinzu explained his concerns to Dale truthfully. After listening, Dale also hesitated. Kinzu was right. He believed in his medical skills, but did others believe it? And if this news spread, it would be a trouble for Kinzu. In the end, Kinzu still called Jefferson. In this regard, he still needed to consult a professional. Of course, Kinzu didn't say that he could definitely cure the patient, but he just said that there was some hope and he wanted to give it a try. After listening to Kinzu's story, Jefferson hesitated for a moment before giving his answer. Boss, you can recruit them to help you in the name of recruiting workers. Kinzu frowned slightly, and said in an unhappy tone, Jefferson, are you kidding? Recruiting workers? You want me to talk to more than a dozen disabled patients about recruiting workers? Do you think I will be driven out by their families? Jefferson chuckled, and did not have any thoughts about Kinzu's bad tone. Instead, he explained in detail. Boss, it doesn't matter. You can tell their families directly that you want to take them to the ranch and raise them because of guilt, and you don't have to let them work. Kinzu frowned even more tightly, but before he could say his question, he heard Jefferson on the opposite side continue to explain. Besides, boss, by recruiting so many disabled patients, who are veterans, the taxes you have to pay next year can be reduced by a large part. Taxes? What does this have to do with paying taxes? Kinzu was a little confused. Wasn't he talking about recruiting workers? Why did he get to the point of taxes? Of course it matters, Jefferson grinned confidently and said with a smile. Boss, the United States has a lot of taxes and is very humane. For example, if you hire a disabled employee, you will enjoy appropriate tax exemption policies. Kinzu was stunned when he heard this. Is this okay? But it's good that way. He has a reason to take them to the ranch. After all, if it's just out of gratitude, there's no need to take them to the ranch. Just give them some money. In this society, there is nothing more tempting than the US dollar. In that case, will there be any trouble if I hire them? For example, the military? Kinzu asked tentatively. He didn't want to offend those big men because of this. Jefferson laughed twice and teased. Boss, don't look at those big men as if they're so idle. They are all busy with their work every day. How can they have time to pay attention to a few retired female soldiers? Kinzu thought about it and it was true. It was such a small thing. It was estimated that they didn't even notice it. Since that was the case, he calmed down, and after a few more pleasantries, Kinzu hung up the phone. Looking at Dale, who looked a little nervous, Kinzu chuckled twice and nodded. No problem, Dale, you go and test their attitude. Just reveal my intention a little bit, and before it is done, tell them not to spread it, including to their families. Dale nodded in understanding, and a bright smile appeared on her tense face. Clean, I know, thank you. Kinzu was about to say a few more words, but suddenly remembered that there were two guys outside, so he quickly stopped talking. After laughing dryly twice to hide his embarrassment, Kinzu changed the subject and said, Well, Dale, come here, I have something for you to do. Dale's expression became nervous. She looked back outside, and then looked at Kinzu with a vigilant face. Boss, I'm not Eva. If you dare to mess around, I'll kick you to death. As she said that, Dale's sharp eyes, intentionally or unintentionally, glanced at a certain part of Kinzu. Kinzu only felt a chill in a certain part of his body, and his body shivered uncontrollably. Well, I have something serious to talk to you about. What are you thinking about? Covering his forehead, Kinzu looked at the woman in front of him helplessly. Is he so unbearable? Dale laughed, not feeling embarrassed at all. Instead, she asked with a smile. What is it? Why is it so mysterious? Kinzu spread his hands and asked. Unigro, the new certification officer of Guinness. Dale nodded and looked at Kinzu blankly. He knew this person. What's the matter? Kinzu took a deep breath, lay back in his chair, and whispered. If I'm not mistaken, this person is the mastermind behind what happened last night. He leaked our information. Hearing this, Dale's face changed and exclaimed. It was him? How could it be? What did he do for? Kinzu spread his hands. I want to know too, but there are only two possibilities, for fame or for profit. Then what should we do? Should we call the police? Dale asked with some gritted teeth. Kinzu shook his head, sighed, and crossed his hands on the desk. It's useless. We don't have any evidence. Director Stella called me this morning. The Japanese refused to explain. Dale stood up with a bang and said with murderous intent, then I'll go and get rid of him. Kinzu smiled with satisfaction. Dale still understood him. Standing up, Kinzu walked to Dale and gently pushed her back to the chair, smiling and saying, Don't get excited, Dale. What I mean is that you should find this person first. It's best to bring him back. I want to find out who he leaked the information to. Dale's body was a little tense. It was a little unnatural to sit on the chair because someone's hand was a little dishonest. Gently breaking away from Kinzu's harassment, Dale nodded. Clean, I understand what you mean. I will go find this guy. Kinzu did not continue to pester him and picked up an address on the desk, which he had just found out through Stella. This is the address. I don't know if he still lives here. Kinzu handed the note to Dale, and his face became a little serious. Dale, your goal is to bring this guy back alive. Can you do it? Dale chuckled twice and shook the note in his hand. Clean, don't worry, I will bring him back to you within 2 days. Chapter 513. Being teased by a bird. After leaving the office, Dale went straight out of the villa. She had to go to the hospital first to persuade Erica and the others. Clean, it's almost noon, what's Dale doing? Eva heard the sound of a car outside and looked over curiously. Kinzu smiled. Nothing, she went to the hospital to see her comrades. Eva nodded when she heard it. She didn't think much about it and thought she was just going to see them. Comrades? Are Dale's comrades in the hospital? Mobica was a little curious. She hadn't been here since Halloween and didn't know what would happen next. Eva looked at Kinzu with a hint of inquiry in her eyes. Kinzu had told her not to tell others about this kind of thing. Kinzu nodded slightly. Anyway, Mobica would often appear in the manor in the future, so it was okay for him to know. Seeing this, Eva told Mobica everything that happened later. After listening to Eva's introduction, Mobica's face turned pale. She never thought that things would turn out so badly. No wonder when she wanted to come over, neither Joseph nor Kinzu would let her come over. Kinzu patted Mobica's thigh and comforted her. Don't worry, it's okay, it's all over. Mobica nodded with some fear. She still couldn't imagine what the consequences would be if a rocket exploded directly among them that day. Just as she was thinking about things, she heard footsteps coming from the stairs. Turning her head, she saw a little girl who looked like a jade sculpture, rubbing her big eyes, dragging a leopard bat down. However, this leopard bat was a little strange, and it seemed to be bigger than any she had ever seen. The one being caught by Shirley's tail was Daru, and he was struggling to keep his balance so as not to be thrown out by his little master. Kinzu was frightened and ran over to take Daru down. Good fellow, this little tiger is not Da hectares or Shao hectares. If he gets angry and bites you, you will regret it. Kinzu held the little girl and sat down on the sofa. He rubbed her hair like a chicken coop and scolded her with a smile. Your little girl, are you finally awake? Yes, I'm awake. Shirley is hungry. The little girl nestled in Kinzu's arms, pouting and acting coquettishly happily. Mobica next to him had just come out of the first blow, and was hit again. Is this still the Shirley with autism? Mobica stood up and took 2 steps at a time. He came to Kinzu, bent down and looked at Shirley, who was like a porcelain doll, and asked softly, Little girl, do you still remember Sister Eva? Shirley raised her little head and looked carefully at the beautiful sister in front of her, and nodded with a smile on her face. Remember, you were Sister Eva, who came to see Shirley with sister on it. Yes, I am Sister Eva. Shirley is so good that she still remembers me. Eva nodded ecstatically, and was a little incoherent with excitement. She felt that she must be dreaming today. First, the jaguar was as well behaved as a kitten, and now it was the little Shirley who returned to normal. Turning her head to look at Kinzu who looked indifferent next to her, Mobica's eyes were full of stars. Kinzu felt a little uncomfortable being looked at by Mobica, and he coughed twice, then looked down at the little girl in his arms. Are you hungry? Then go eat. Why do I find that you are getting lazier and lazier? Who did you learn this from? The little girl blinked her big eyes twice, and before she could speak, she heard a pleasant voice from the side. Of course I learned it from the master, Shirley nodded in agreement and said in a childish voice, I learned it from you, uncle. It's very comfortable to sleep. Kinzu's forehead was covered with black lines. He turned his head and looked at Heidi, who was squatting in the living room, combing her beautiful feathers. He hated her so much. Why did he have a brain twitch and leave it here? He should have let Heidi take it away. Clean, is this a macaw? Mobica was shocked again. Is there such a smart parrot? The little parrot next to him heard the voice, and his little eyes rolled around, and stretched out a wing to invite him. Hi, beautiful girl, hello, I'm Heidi, can we be friends? Mobica looked at the little parrot in a daze. Is it saying hello to me? After struggling for a long time, it was not right to answer or not to answer. For a moment, he was a little at a loss. Heidi was getting impatient waiting, and her little wings were probably tired of holding up. She flapped her wings twice and flew to Mobica's shoulder. She rubbed her little head against Mobica's cheek and said, Hey, beautiful girl, how about making friends? Mobica was petrified. She turned her head to look at the parrot on her shoulder, blinking its watery eyes, not knowing what to say. Was she teased? She must have been teased. The most important thing was, I was teased by a bird. Fuck, this world is crazy. Mobica grabbed her hair in frustration, not knowing how to respond for a moment. Kinzu next to her finally came to his senses, looked at Eva, and shook his head helplessly. Especially looking at the somewhat crazy Mobica, Kinzu was even more amused. Is this still the quirky Mobica in her memory? Why is she being teased by a bird now? Grabbing Heidi, Kinzu flicked the little guy's head with his hand and scolded with a smile. Where did you learn these messes? Be honest. After being caught by Kinzu, the little guy immediately wilted, lowered his head, and kept mumbling. I remember that the master was chatting up like this, why doesn't it work? With one sentence, 3 pairs of big eyes looked over, and even Mobica recovered and stared at Kinzu, saying with some resentment, well, Clean, come and teach me how to chat up. Now I don't know how to respond when someone chatters up. Kinzu felt so wronged in his heart, even more wrong than Doi. When did he chat up others like this? Looking at the little guy who was still chattering in his hand, Kinzu had the idea of destroying the body for a moment. No, I haven't done such a thing, why should I destroy the body? As soon as he let go of the little guy, Kinzu shrugged his shoulders and said, well, you misunderstood. I think she was talking about the previous owner. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a loud sound of car braking at the door. Kinzu's heart skipped a beat. It can't be such a coincidence, right? Chapter 514 Even the white tiger bullies people. Kinzu looked out through the French window of the villa, only to see Chainmew push open the door and get out of his black Mercedes. Rolling his eyes, Kinzu sat back on the sofa. This bastard, he made a broken Mercedes feel like a Ferrari. Boss, where's the bluefin tuna? Is that bluefin tuna okay? Chainmew's voice came in before he arrived. When he entered the villa, he saw Mobica sitting on the sofa. Chainmew was stunned for a moment and said with a smile, Mobica, long time no see, is Joseph okay? Of course he is fine. Now I ride horses and graze at home every day. I can also research some new dishes when I have nothing to do. Mobica smiled and stood up, saying hello to Chainmew. After the two sat down again, Kinzu asked in a depressed tone, Brother Chen, isn't your restaurant busy? Why are you here so early? Chainmew took the tea from Eva with a smile, smashed it gently, and then said, Boss, you also said, who would go to the restaurant to have a full meal this early in the morning? Just make some desserts. Besides, there are chefs in the restaurant, not just me. Kinzu patted his head, he was a little confused because of his business recently. After a few pleasantries, Kinzu couldn't stand Chainmew's fiery eyes, and took him to load the 2 bluefin tuna. Chainmew was relieved until he saw the workers successfully load the bluefin tuna into the refrigerated truck. After knowing what happened yesterday, he has been worried. Although Kinzu said that the bluefin tuna was fine, he still couldn't help wanting to come and see. When the two returned to the villa, Chainmew discovered the jaguar under the pergola. Unlike Mobica's limp hands and feet, Chainmew's hands and feet became a little excited. Boss, is this something you raised? Are you going to use it to cook? The white tiger, who was originally lying leisurely, immediately got angry. Using itself to cook? Do you think you are not dying fast enough? Climbing up and arching its body, the white tiger was not polite at all, and roared angrily at Chainmew. Roar. Bang. Plop. Chainmew was frightened and shivered. He took 2 steps back involuntarily, bumped into a vase next to him, and sat directly on the ground. Seeing this, the white tiger was not willing to give in. It supported the ground with its claws and was about to pounce on Chainmew. Kinzu was frightened beside him. If he was pounced by it, not to mention anything else, the weight alone would be enough to crush Chainmew and break his bones. He quickly scolded, Beru, come back, what are you doing? Be quiet. Beru retracted his claws in dismay, relaxed his body, and looked at Chainmew deeply. After making sure that he remembered this guy who was going to be made into a dish, he returned to the porch and combed out his messy hair. Sitting on the ground, Chainmew rubbed his feet with a painful look on his face, and looked at Beru with horror from time to time. This guy scared him. At that moment just now, he even thought that he was going to say goodbye to this colorful world. Kinzu walked forward with a wry smile, helped Chainmew up and walked towards the villa. You only think about eating. Don't you know that animals have spirits? Now it's over. Chainmew looked at the white tiger with tears in his eyes, muttering, What kind of broken tiger did you raise? I just said it casually, do you have to do this to me? Being stared at by Chainmew, the white tiger climbed up again, and it seemed that he was still a little eager to move. Okay, you stay here honestly. If you dare to mess around again, I will show you how to deal with you. Kinzu scolded the white tiger with a gloomy face. This guy, is he not done yet? If I am not here, do you still want to eat him? Seeing that Kinzu was angry, the white tiger wilted immediately, and hid in the corner of the corridor with its tail between its legs. A person, oh no, a tiger, drew circles there. After scolding the white tiger, Kinzu turned around and helped Chainmew to continue walking inside. See? Animals are all spiritual. You must remember that if you have malice towards them, they will definitely return you with greater malice. Chainmew nodded in agreement, but he said, I have grown up, and this is the first time I have seen such a spiritual guy. At this point, Chainmew was also a little strange, and blinked in confusion. By the way, boss, I found that your pets seem to be more spiritual. Kinzu rolled his eyes. You just discovered it. Just as he was about to say something, he saw Eva and Mobuka coming out together. Clean, what happened? I just heard the voice of the white tiger. Eva walked over with some concern. When she got closer, she found that Chainmew was different and was startled. What's wrong with Chen? Is he injured? Hearing what Eva said, Mobuka behind him also trotted over and was also startled when she saw Kinzu supporting the limping Chainmew. Brother Chen, what happened? How did it become like this? Chainmew was a little embarrassed, hesitating and not knowing what to say. Kinzu smiled helplessly. Okay, let's go inside and talk. He helped Chainmew into the living room, put the guy back on the sofa, and then Kinzu told him what had just happened. Ah? You want to kill the white tiger? Eva stood up first, unable to accept it, glaring at Chainmew opposite, thinking that this guy was really too bad. That's right, Brother Chen, how can you cook with a tiger? Mobuka also looked at Chainmew with some indignation, which made Chainmew, who was already a little ashamed, even more ashamed. Even Shirley, who was standing by, pouted her lips after hearing what Eva and Mobuka said, and said seriously, Uncle Chen is so mean. He wants to bully bear you. Shirley doesn't like you anymore. I just said it casually. Who knew it would take it seriously? Chainmew had a sad face. Under the gaze and criticism of the three women, 2 adults and 1 child, he was so ashamed that he wanted to find a crack in the ground to crawl into. Humph, my bear, you are so smart. Shirley had a proud expression and made faces at Chainmew, who was sitting on the sofa. Seeing that the 2 women still wanted to continue the criticism, Kinzu quickly tried to smooth things over. He winked at Eva and said, Okay, Brother Chen didn't mean it. Eva, do we have any medicine for bruises? Take it out and wipe it for Brother Chen. Eva was a little dissatisfied, but she still nodded obediently and got up to get the medicine box from the storage room. When Eva left, Shirley started to act like a spoiled child in Kinzu's arms again. When Mobuka was left alone, she felt too embarrassed to continue. Thanks to the 200 starting coins reward from the author who read novels since the age of 10. Chapter 515 Kinzu and the Beasts. By the time Chainmew limped and stood up to say goodbye, it was almost noon. Watching him climb up to the passenger seat of the refrigerated truck with difficulty, Kinzu smiled bitterly and said, Why are you in such a hurry? Can't you go back in the afternoon? Chainmew had just handed his Mercedes-Benz key to someone else. When he heard Kinzu's request to stay, he hurriedly shook his head. No. Boss, I'm afraid I won't be able to go back in the afternoon. Recalling the look in the eyes of the big tiger, Chainmew felt that he would have nightmares when he went to bed at night. At the same time, he secretly made up his mind, don't let this guy fall into my hands, otherwise I will deal with you. Watching the convoy go away, Kinzu shrugged and returned to the villa. After lunch, Eva took Mobuka upstairs, and no one knew what they were talking about. Shirley, the little girl, felt a little sleepy after dinner and went to sleep again. Kinzu sat alone on the sofa in the living room in a daze, surrounded by a circle of beasts. Daha was lying on the carpet with his arms and legs spread out, and he rested his head on Xiao's thigh. The 2 brothers were snuggling together and snoring slightly. Daha was lying on the carpet on the other side, holding something in his mouth and biting it hard. Xiao, who was standing next to him, also noticed his big brother's action, and left little Jerry next to him, and ran over from a distance, wanting to wrestle with his big brother. Kinzu looked at the 2 little guys fighting over each other, and was a little curious, so he leaned over to take a look. It turned out that the chewing bone that Daha had used before was pulled out by Dahu from somewhere. Seeing that the 2 little guys were about to fight, Kinzu quickly went to the storage room to find another one and threw it to Xiao. Now it was Xiao who wanted to steal Dahu's toy, but when Dahu found that Xiao's toy was bigger and newer than his own, It immediately threw away the chewing bone in its mouth and rushed towards the tiger. Before it could react, its new toy was snatched away. The tiger was even more annoyed. It had no interest in the old bone thrown by its brother. Taking 2 steps at a time, the tiger accelerated and knocked the tiger down directly. The 2 guys were in a stalemate again. Kinzu had a headache. How come even the 2 little tigers knew that they loved the new and disliked the old? In desperation, Kinzu had to get another chewing bone and threw it over. Fortunately, he bought a lot at the beginning, otherwise he really couldn't tell them apart. Little Jerry watched them fighting with some boredom, and took his wife to hide aside for a nap. Little Dado still drooped his little ears and walked around the living room in small steps. There was no way, he was a little full of noon and couldn't digest it. The little parrot that made Kinzu scratch his head was very tactful and went to cultivate feelings with Shirley. It was probably that it also knew that if it stayed with its owner any longer, it might become a red-braced dog. After looking around, Kinzu felt ashamed. He thought that his brother was a tall, rich and handsome man after all, so how could he be reduced to the situation of associating with a group of beasts? Sitting back on the sofa, Kinzu stretched and rubbed his sleepy eyes, wondering if he should go back to sleep for a while. But looking at the big tiger and the little tiger next to him, these 2 new guys have no place to live. Yawning, forget it, anyway, it's boring now, why not make 2 nests for them? Do it when you think of it. Since you have decided, you have to start. Kinzu turned on his mobile phone, checked the style of the doghouse on the internet, and then took a pen and wrote down the things he needed to buy. When he was looking for it, the screen of the mobile phone suddenly turned, and a familiar ringtone rang in his ears. Kinzu was startled, his hands trembled, and his phone almost fell to the ground. He looked at the caller ID and saw that it was Dale calling. After answering the phone, Kinzu asked in confusion, "What's wrong, Dale? What's the matter?" "Boss, Erica has already talked to her family and they can move in at any time." Dale's voice was full of excitement. Kinzu scratched his head. It was healed so soon. Thinking about the 12 women with limited mobility living in the ranch, Kinzu suddenly felt that he had not considered it carefully. After moving in, it would be impossible for him to cure them all at once, otherwise he would be dissected soon. Then the question is, who will take care of them during the treatment? Himself? What a joke. What about Dale? Maybe, but how many can she take care of? In addition to Eva? It seems a bit reluctant. Boss, did you hear me?" Seeing that Kinzu was silent, Dale became anxious. It was a good thing, wouldn't he change his mind again? Kinzu thought about it and said, "Well, Dale, listen to me first. We may not have considered it carefully enough." "Well, boss, you tell me." Dale suppressed the feeling of loss in her heart and said with a forced smile. After Kinzu explained his concerns in detail, the smile on Dale's face disappeared and she hesitated. There are 12 people, not just 1 or 2. If they all go at once, can she take care of them? But then she thought about it and told them that they had already been told. If she told them now, they would have to wait a little longer. Dale felt that she couldn't do it. Gritting her teeth, Dale said, "Boss, leave the care of them to me and Eva. I believe we can do it." Kinzu felt relieved when he heard this. Although he felt that it was a bit difficult for the 2 women, there was no other good way. After all, these women are getting better day by day. If someone else were to take care of them, the news would spread everywhere. "Okay, since you said so, let's take them over." Kinzu finally made the decision. Hearing this, Dale choked up and thank you, boss. "Okay, I'll go over now, let's do all the formalities in front of their family." Kinzu hung up the phone, got up and went upstairs, and told Eva that he was going to pick someone up. "Okay, clean, be careful on the road, I'll clean up the room now." Eva nodded with a heavy face. She felt guilty about the experience of those women. Speaking of it, this matter from beginning to end was caused by her unpromising father. If it weren't for him, how could things become like this now? Mobica next to her seemed to understand Eva's mood at the moment. She shook her hand and comforted her softly. "Sister Eva, don't think too much. I will come here often and take care of them with you." Seeing that the 2 had no objections, Kinzu smiled with satisfaction, changed his clothes, drove his McLaren, and went straight to Boston. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en cines fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrás la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Tesperama's Paris emerged on Un Mundo de Novelas Incredibles. Chapter 516 Anthony George. Because they needed rehabilitation treatment, Erica and the others were transferred to a rehabilitation center in the suburbs of Boston a few days ago. When Keynes' McLaren stopped at the door of the rehabilitation center, Jefferson had been waiting here for a long time. Helping Keynes open the car door, Jefferson smiled and said, "Boss, you are still kind-hearted." Keynes waved his hand and said nothing. He knew that this was the difference between Chinese and Western cultures, and it would be difficult to explain it in a short time. Compared with the cold money society in the West, the human society in China is sometimes more popular. Just like this incident, although Keynes wanted to take them back to the ranch because he was sure that he could cure them, it also proved that Keynes' heart was not completely eroded by capital. If Jefferson were to handle this matter, it would be nothing more than giving some money to send people away. Some people even don't think they have an obligation to do anything. Even if others are injured to protect him, in their opinion, that is what others should do. They always say that they are taxpayers and the police should protect taxpayers, but they have never thought that the little tax they pay is not enough to do anything. Shaking his head, Keynes threw away all the distracting thoughts in his mind. He also found that after coming to the United States, he thought more than before. Just like what someone said, when people are idle, they always like to think about random things. When they arrived at the door of the ward, Dale was waiting anxiously in the corridor. Beside her, stood a group of blonde and blue-eyed foreigners. "Boss, you're here." Dale saw Keynes coming with Jefferson, and her face immediately showed a burst of joy. Keynes nodded and looked at the group of people next to him. There were men and women, and their ages were very different. There was a white old man with white hair and a big belly, who looked to be in his 50s or 60s. There was also a little girl with a childish face, twin ponytails, and blonde and blue eyes. At this moment, these people were staring at him closely with doubts, hatred, or complicated eyes. "Boss, these are Erica's family members." Dale began to introduce Keynes one by one. Keynes followed behind Dale, his face a little heavy, and greeted these people one by one. Although he didn't remember any of them. After greeting, Keynes looked at the complicated eyes of the people, stood in front of them, and bowed deeply. Now, everyone was a little at a loss. They also heard from their daughter that the person to be protected this time was a billionaire and a friend of the governor. Although they didn't expect it to be a Chinese, they didn't expect him to bow to them. "Mr. Clean, what are you doing? We can't afford it." A white man in his 40s, with a full beard and looking a little vicissitudes of life, waved his hands hurriedly, signaling Keynes not to do this. Keynes slowly straightened up, shook his head, and said in a heavy tone, "It's because of protecting us that your daughter suffered such a great disaster. We feel bad too." Shaking his head, the white man was a little sad, but he still tried hard not to cry. He said, "These are fate. Since they put on that dress, there will be such a day. I just didn't expect it to come so soon." Keynes was a little surprised and looked up at the white man. He didn't expect him to have such an opinion. This is a rare mentality. In the face of such great harm to his relatives, he can still maintain a calm attitude to think. This is not easy. Perhaps seeing Keynes' doubts, Dale leaned close to his ear and introduced softly, "Boss, this is Erica's father, Anthony George, who used to be a soldier and retired due to injury." Keynes suddenly realized that he also retired due to injury. No wonder he had such a feeling. "Mr. Anthony, although that's what I said, as the person involved, I've always been uneasy. This time I came here to take them all to my manor, where there will be someone to take care of them. Moreover, I have contacted the country and have invited several experts to come here to take care of their bodies and make the greatest efforts for their recovery." "Wow!" the dozen people around them all exclaimed. Although they knew that Keynes wanted to take their daughter back to take care of her, they just thought that Keynes was taking care of his daughter by the way in order to avoid taxes. They were all a little reluctant at first, but they couldn't resist their daughter and reluctantly agreed. But they didn't expect that Keynes would not only take care of their daughter, but also invite doctors from China to take care of his daughter. What is he doing for? This is the question in everyone's mind at present. Even Anthony's eyes when looking at Keynes have changed a little. Not becoming more friendly, but becoming more vigilant. When did the capitalist switch to being a philanthropist? "Mr. Clean, can I ask you why?" Anthony looked into Keynes' eyes and asked directly. Keynes hesitated for a moment, looked into Anthony's eyes, and answered firmly, "For my own peace of mind." Yes, for my own peace of mind, this is Keynes' true thought. After hearing this, Anthony was stunned on the spot, and the people behind him also looked at Kinzu stupidly. Is this a fool? For his own peace of mind, he would not hesitate to spend such a huge price to save a dozen strangers. Anthony didn't believe it either, but looking at Kinzu's sincere eyes, he had to believe it. For the first time, he had an irresistible curiosity about the mysterious and backward China mentioned by his comrades. What kind of country can breed such a group of lovely people? Kinzu ignored the discussions and complicated eyes of the crowd and followed Dale into a ward. At this moment, Erica's eyes were filled with tears, and she looked at Kinzu with extremely complicated eyes. She opened her mouth, wanting to say something but didn't know how to start. The soundproofing of the ward was not very good, and everything that happened outside could not escape her ears. Since the accident, although the state subsidies were given to her without a penny less, she felt that her heart was dead. She left the army she loved most and her closest comrades, lying in bed all day long. She didn't know what she could do. Especially, there were so many sisters who accompanied her to suffer, she felt that she was really living a year. But when Dale came to her in the morning and told her that it was possible to be cured, her heart slowly came back to life. Especially when Kinzu said at the door that he had invited a doctor from China, her heart came back to life even more. Chapter 517 Return to the ranch. Thank you, Mr. Clean, thank you. Erica's voice was a little choked. Kinzu smiled lightly and tried to speak in a calm tone. These are all what I should do. Let's not talk about this. Are you ready? Let's go back now. Erica nodded. She didn't have much to prepare. Now she needed someone to push her wherever she went. Kinzu gestured to Jefferson next to him. Jefferson nodded, opened the door and walked out. After a while, 2 female nurses came over and directly backed Erica's bed out. Downstairs, 12 ambulances were lined up. With the help of medical staff, 12 beds were loaded into the cars one by one. After Kinzu said goodbye to Anthony and others, he got into his McLaren, but this time it was Dale who drove. After waiting in the car for a while, until the ambulances drove out one by one, Jefferson came back with a thick stack of documents. Boss, take a look, everything has been signed. Through the car window, Jefferson smiled and handed the documents to Kinzu. Kinzu took the document and threw it into the locker without looking at it carefully. Then he smiled and said, "Sorry to bother you today." Jefferson waved his hand. "Nothing, isn't this my job?" "Well, I'll leave first. I'll have to trouble you to follow up on the follow-up matters." Nodding to Jefferson, Kinzu raised the car window and signaled Dale to drive. Jefferson waited until the car was far away before he retracted his gaze and returned to his car. As soon as he opened the car door, he heard the voice of a middle-aged man next to him. "Sir, can you wait a moment?" Jefferson turned his eyes and recognized who the person was. It turned out to be Erica's father, Anthony George. "Hello, Mr. Anthony, is there anything else?" Jefferson stopped getting into the car and asked politely. "Can we find a place to talk?" Anthony's face was very calm, and nothing could be seen. Jefferson pondered for a moment and nodded gently. "Get in the car." In a very ordinary coffee shop, Jefferson looked at Anthony opposite him and a little girl about 14 or 15 years old next to him, and was very confused. He didn't understand what these 2 people wanted him to do. Taking a sip of coffee, Jefferson spoke first. "Mr. Anthony, I wonder what you want to talk to me about." Stirring the coffee in the cup, Anthony was silent for a moment, and asked in a low voice, "Lawyer Jefferson, I wonder how much you know about Mr. Clean." Jefferson was stunned. "Mr. Clean? You mean, my employer, Mr. Kinzu?" Anthony nodded. "Yes, your employer, Mr. Clean." Jefferson opened his mouth, not knowing how to start. Ask him how much he knows about his boss. He really wanted to ask, "How much do you know about your former boss?" After hesitating for a moment, Jefferson still asked, "Well, Mr. Anthony, do you have any questions?" Anthony actually regretted it as soon as he said it. No matter whether Jefferson knew Kinzu or not, he couldn't tell him. Anthony smiled awkwardly and said directly, "Lawyer Jefferson, I'll tell you the truth. I'm actually worried about Erica. I don't understand why Mr. Keen must take Erica and the others to his estate." Huh? Jefferson looked at the man opposite him with some confusion. What did he mean by this? Anthony shrugged. "I'm sorry, maybe I'm overthinking it, but I always feel that Mr. King's purpose doesn't seem simple." Jefferson shook his head and chuckled twice. "Mr. Anthony, I think you're overthinking it." Looking at Anthony's puzzled eyes, Jefferson continued. As far as I know, Mr. King's personal assets are nearly $3 billion, and he is also one of the directors of Pingo Company. He has contacts with Governor Theodore and has connections with upper-class people in New York. After speaking, Jefferson put down the coffee cup in his hand, looked directly into Anthony's eyes, and asked, "Do you think he needs to have any other ideas about your daughter?" Anthony looked at Jefferson in a daze, and even the coffee cup in his hand was accidentally spilled. This, he stammered, not knowing what to say. Anthony never thought that Kinzu would have so many assets, let alone that Kinzu would have such a great influence. Come to think of it, would the person who could send out his daughter's troops directly be a simple person? What's more, what is there about his own daughter that is worth others' conspiracy? Although he didn't want to admit it, he had to admit that his daughter was already disabled. Mr. Anthony, don't worry, Mr. Keene is definitely kind-hearted. Jefferson stood up, walked to Anthony, patted him on the shoulder gently, and then walked out of the cafe directly. He didn't mean to laugh at Anthony, on the contrary, he understood him very well. This is a man's love for his children. Maybe he won't express it, but he always loves and cares about his children. "Dad, is my sister okay?" The little girl with the ponytail next to Anthony asked timidly. After coming back to his senses, Anthony smiled bitterly, gently stroked the little girl's ponytail, and comforted her. "Candy, don't worry, your sister is fine, let's go back first." Candy nodded and followed her father out of the cafe, but in her heart, a man's name had already been imprinted. When Kinzu and his party returned to the ranch, it was already past 3 in the afternoon. Such a big battle even alarmed old John. The old man rode Sandra and trotted to Kinzu's side, asking in confusion, "Boss, what are you doing?" Kinzu did not explain, but directed the medical staff to send the female soldiers to the guest rooms one by one. 12 female soldiers, 6 guest rooms, just 2 people per room. Although the medical staff from the rehabilitation center were surprised by this place, they did not forget their professional qualities. After settling everyone, a leader came to Kinzu and asked politely, "Mr. Clean, when will your doctor arrive? I can stay and take over the patient's condition." Kinzu shook his head. "Doctor? Where can I find a doctor?" "No, you can go back first. I invited a well-known Chinese doctor this time. They have their own treatment methods." The leading doctor was a little hesitant to speak. No matter what kind of doctor, some basic conditions must be explained. But after thinking about it carefully, he sighed, said nothing, and drove away with everyone. Chapter 518 Diluted Spiritual Liquid. Kinzu was relieved when the hired doctors left. He finally fooled these guys away. Looking at old John beside him, Kinzu whispered about the matter, and finally looked at him and said, "Just you know about this, don't tell anyone else." Old John nodded, and looked at Kinzu with a little more respect. No matter where, good people will be respected by people, which is why it is said that human nature is good. Of course, those mentally unhealthy people are not included. When old John rode Sandra and walked away slowly, Kinzu turned around and walked into the villa. In the villa, the little guys gathered together, accompanied Shirley, and looked at everything in a daze. "Uncle, it's afternoon now, why don't those big sisters get up?" Seeing Kinzu coming in, Shirley came over and asked curiously. Kinzu sat on the sofa in silence, touched the little girl's head, and explained softly, "Because they're injured and can't get up now." Looking at the little girl's confused eyes, Kinzu warned, "Shirley, you must remember, don't ask the big sisters like this, they will be sad." Shirley nodded her head blankly. Although she didn't understand why that big sister would be sad, but her uncle said so, she remembered it. After sending the little girl to torment her friends, Kinzu got up and went upstairs. Eva and Mobika are now busy, helping everyone to pack up, and occasionally chatting with the female soldiers on the beds. Dale is checking each room to see if they need anything, and is also gently soothing everyone's restless hearts. They have just arrived in an unfamiliar environment. If it were normal, they wouldn't care. The guns in their hands would give them the greatest sense of security. But now, they are lying on the hospital bed, unable to walk or move. The insecurity in their hearts was already very great, and now they are even more confused. Kinzu walked through the rooms one by one, looking at the female soldiers covered with quilts, revealing only their beautiful faces. Who could have imagined that they could not get out of bed now, and some of them were wrapped in bandages? After a round, Kinzu did not disturb the 3 women of Dale, and went to the kitchen by himself. He opened a bottle of pure water, thought about it, exchanged 2 drops of spiritual liquid, and blended them into the 5-liter bottle of pure water. Looking at the pure water that turned green and somewhat crystal clear, Kinzu nodded with satisfaction. 2 drops of spiritual liquid should be able to help them recover, but the effect will not be too amazing. When the 3 women of Dale appeased everyone and walked downstairs a little tiredly, they found that a glass bottle had been placed on the coffee table in the living room. In the glass bottle, there was a green unknown liquid. Eva went up to smell it, and a refreshing scent instantly cleared her whole body, making her shudder involuntarily, and the fatigue in her body seemed to disappear. Clean, what is this? It's so magical. Eva looked up at Kinzu, with a look of shock on her face. Seeing this, Dale and Mobica looked at each other, and also came forward to look at the glass bottle that looked like a wine bottle, and each smelled it. In an instant, 2 eyes with surprise and doubt were also projected on Kinzu. Seeing the expressions of the 3 women, Kinzu remembered that he was really damned, and his women had not enjoyed this kind of transformation. But now is not the time to talk about this. Kinzu looked at Dale and instructed. This is the Chinese medicine I asked the old experts to prepare. You'll take it up and give it to them. Remember, 1 small cup is enough for each person. Dale nodded suddenly, picked up the glass bottle on the coffee table, and walked upstairs carefully. Looking at her fearless expression, it seemed as if what she was holding in her arms was not an ordinary glass bottle, but some most precious treasure. Eva looked at Kinzu with a strange look on her face. The old experts. If she was not mistaken, the bottle was thrown in the kitchen by her, right? How did it become the Chinese medicine prepared by the old experts? Kinzu coughed twice, ignored Eva's strange expression, looked at Mobica next to him, and asked, Mobica, did Joseph agree? Mobica nodded slightly. Well, I have already told Joseph that I will stay at your house for the next few days. Thinking of the phone call, when Joseph heard that he was going to stay at Kinzu's place for a few days, and was a little angry, Mobica couldn't help showing a sweet smile at the corner of his mouth. Kinzu was a little embarrassed. It was estimated that this girl must not have explained the reason to Joseph. Well, now he is in trouble. Thinking of Joseph's weird eyes looking at him, Kinzu also smiled bitterly in his heart. But it didn't matter. Kinzu lay on the sofa and sighed. After all, he had already eaten the fat meat, so it was reasonable for him to be complained. He glanced upstairs, not knowing what the situation was. The situation upstairs was much better than Kinzu had imagined. After Dale took the medicine upstairs, the first person she looked for was Erica. Looking at the green liquid in her hand, she heard that it was the medicine Kinzu asked the old Chinese doctor to prescribe. Erica didn't even hesitate and drank it directly. After drinking it, Erica returned the cup to Dale. She smiled and was about to say thank you, but she felt her lower abdomen getting a little hot. Before she could react, a feeling that made her feel ecstatic instantly invaded Erica's whole body. Including her right leg, which had no sensation due to nerve obstruction, it also became light and fluttery, as if it was back under her control. After a long time, under the somewhat worried gaze of Dale and another female soldier, Erica opened her eyes. Her eyes were full of shock and excitement, and even her lips were trembling. Erica, how do you feel? Are you okay? Dale sat down beside the bed with some concern, looking at Erica with concern. Erica shook her head, lifted the quilt, revealing 2 slender and straight long legs, and looked at Dale excitedly. Dale, hurry up, pinch me. Dale was a little confused. What was going on? Seeing this, Erica anxiously took Dale's right hand and pressed it on her thigh, and said anxiously, quick, pinch it. Dale was startled, and did not dare to neglect it. She pinched Erica's slender thigh lightly with her hand. No, harder, pinch harder. Erica shouted a little excitedly. Dale was also panicked now, and could no longer care about anything else. She pinched it hard with her hand. The second update today. Thanks to Dubig for the reward, and James YOOOLV11 for the reward of 11,000 Kidian coins. This book finally has a new leader. I will owe you more chapters. The leader will add 2 more chapters. Leo now owes you 4 chapters, so I will pay you back today. Chapter 519 Amazing Effects, additional chapter for the 10-year-old helmsman. Ha ha, ha ha. Her legs were all bruised, but Erica laughed like crazy, and the louder she laughed, the louder she laughed. In the end, she just started crying. Dale stood there at a loss, looking at Erica, panicking and not knowing what to do. Is there something wrong with this bottle of medicine? Thinking of this, Dale turned around and wanted to go downstairs. She wanted to ask what was going on. Dale, where are you going? Seeing that Dale was about to leave, Erica finally woke up from her madness and asked hurriedly. Dale stopped, looked at Erica with some surprise, and said excitedly, Erica? Are you okay? I was scared to death. I'm going to ask Keen what's going on with this medicine. Shaking her head gently, Erica's face once again showed an excited smile, but this time she didn't lose her composure like before. Del, do you know? My leg has regained consciousness. It has regained consciousness. What? Two exclamations sounded in the room at the same time. Del and the female soldier named Zara next to her looked at each other. Is this person crazy? Erica, are you serious? You have regained consciousness? Looking at Erica's bruised thigh, Del asked in disbelief. Erica nodded excitedly. Yes, I can clearly feel the pain from my thigh. Although it is still a little slow, I really feel it. I feel pain. God knows, since the accident, being able to feel pain in the thigh is a dream for Erica. For so many days, this leg seems to have nothing to do with her. No matter how she manipulates it, it has no consciousness at all. It is conceivable why she became so crazy just now. Del sat on the bed in disbelief and reached out to hit Erica's thigh again. This time, she completely believed it. Because at the moment when she exerted force, she could clearly feel Erica's thigh muscles twitching uncontrollably. This is an instinct. Oh my God, you scared me to death, Erica, you really scared me to death. Dale could no longer control her emotions and hugged Erica. The two cried and laughed for a while. Zara was stunned watching from the side. When she came to her senses, she immediately shouted excitedly, Dale, come on, I want to drink too, let me regain consciousness. Hearing this, Dale loosened her arms holding Erica and nodded at Zara apologetically. Zara, don't worry, I'll come right over. When Dale carefully carried a cup of green liquid to Zara's bedside, she was so excited that she didn't know what to do. Because Zara had an injured arm and was still bandaged, Dale didn't let Zara do it, but held the cup and fed Zara herself. Zara only felt a stream of cool air flowing down her mouth, and before she could react, the liquid in her mouth had disappeared without a trace. Then, just like what Erica felt just now, a stream of heat rose up, and after a moment, it began to invade her whole body. Really, this is true, I really regained consciousness. Zara muttered to herself, and tears could not help but flow down. She didn't know how long she hadn't cried, but at this moment, she just wanted to cry loudly to vent the grievances and sorrow in her heart. Erica looked at the excited Zara, felt the pain in her thigh, thought of the sisters next door, looked at Dale with gratitude, and said excitedly, Dale, thank Mr. Keen for me, we're him alive. Dale shook her head. Keen said that these are what he should do, after all, you're protecting him. Erica shook her head, no, we were doing it to carry out the mission. If it was someone else, we would also protect him. After that, looking at Dale, Erica promised. Tell Mr. Keen that from now on, I, Erica, am his person. This life is his and will only belong to him in the future. Zara on the side also nodded excitedly. She suddenly found hope in despair. They don't care about anything now. They are willing to stand up again and live like normal people. Dale nodded gently and said nothing more. She also knew what the sisters were thinking. After a few words of comfort, Dale took the medicine and continued to the next room. Similar scenes were staged in the 6 guest rooms of the villa. After seeing the hope of recovery, everyone was not stingy with their loyalty. They knew that there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. If you want to get something, you always have to pay something. And now all they have is loyalty. When Dale came downstairs, her eyes were still red, which scared the 3 people in the living room. Dale, what's wrong with you? Is the medicine ineffective? Kinzu stood up with a guilty conscience. He really didn't know the effect of 2 drops of spiritual liquid, and wondered whether to add another drop of spiritual liquid. No, Clean, the effect of the medicine is very good, Erica and the others have regained consciousness. Speaking of the effect of the medicine, Dale, who had calmed down, almost shed tears again, looking at Kinzu gratefully. That's good, as long as it works. Kinzu breathed a sigh of relief. Being able to regain consciousness is just right, it seems that he has a talent for making medicine. He took out the bucket of purified water from behind and placed it on the coffee table in front of the 3 women's surprised eyes. Well, Dale, remember, give them 3 cups a day. I'll increase the dosage when I see the effect. Looking at the purified water that had just been opened, the 3 were speechless. Is this the medicine you got from the old Chinese doctor? Kinzu knew what they were thinking by looking at their expressions. He had already explained this. Don't look at me like that. Although the water is just ordinary purified water, the things added to it are what can really work. The 3 women suddenly realized that this was the case. Kinzu's mouth curled up slightly. What he said was also true, but there was no such thing as an old Chinese doctor. Thinking that his women had not yet transformed their bodies, Qin pointed to the bottle on the coffee table and said, "By the way, you can also drink 2 cups of this. It is very helpful for the human body." At the beginning, he was afraid of any side effects, so he never took it out, but only used it to cultivate seeds. But after several experiments, Qin found that this spiritual liquid did not have any side effects on the human body, but the effect was very obvious. Add more. Chapter 520. Taking the white tiger for a walk. The 3 girls looked at the spiritual liquid on the coffee table, hesitated for a moment, and shook their heads. "No, let's treat Erica and the others first." Dale opened her mouth to reject Qin's proposal. Qin nodded gently, and did not continue to insist. It would not be too late to talk about it after Erica and the others were cured. Dinner was simple: hamburger, pasta and cheddar soup. Although simple, it also made Eva very busy. The guys who eat white rice suddenly changed from 3 to 15. How could she not be busy? No, this does not include the few little guys who are standing at the door of the kitchen, looking in eagerly. They are also little ancestors. Fortunately, Qin also sympathized with Eva and contracted the meals of the little guys. Daha, Xiaohe and the little tigers are simple to eat, and a small piece of beef can solve the problem. The food for the white tiger is also simple, and a large piece of beef can solve the problem. Just looking at the beef stock that was less than half, Qin's heart was a little bit clenched. Damn, raising tigers is really not something that ordinary people can afford. Just eating can bankrupt a family of 3. He went to the refrigerator to get some fruits for Jerry and his wife, but Qin found sadly that there was not much fruit left. Scratching his head, Qin picked up his phone and called Jennifer. He checked the balance of his account and breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, there was no danger of becoming a debtor for the time being. With the money from the sale of bluefin tuna and the silver emitted by Chain Mu, plus the remaining 20 million, his savings exceeded $50 million. However, thinking of the taxes to be paid next year, Qin still felt a little distressed, because they were all green US dollars. Thinking of the taxes, Qin compared the expenses of raising pets and suddenly found that these were nothing. After dinner, Qin was a little embarrassed. He and Shirley shared a room. Dale and Eva each had a room. Where would Mobica sleep? Eva seemed to see Qin's embarrassment, smiled and lowered her head to say something to Shirley, then pulled the little girl up. "Clean, Shirley will sleep with me tonight, we'll leave first." Shirley also made a face at Qin sweetly. "Uncle, you sleep by yourself. Shirley wants to listen to Sister Eva's story." Qin immediately breathed a sigh of relief, nodded gratefully at Eva, then smiled at Shirley and said, "Little girl, you don't need Uncle anymore now that you have Sister Eva." Shirley hesitated a little after hearing this, looked at Eva, then looked at Qin as if reconsidering where to sleep at night. It's bad. Qin's heart skipped a beat, and he wanted to slap himself twice. "Why are you so quick to talk? Now it's all right." Eva also gave Qin a charming roll of the eyes, and whispered a few words in the little girl's ear, and the little girl became happy again. "Uncle, you should sleep by yourself. Shirley has grown up and can't sleep with you anymore." Puff. Dale and Mobica next to them burst out laughing. "Is this okay?" Qin was also dumbfounded. He just stared at Eva's back, not knowing what to say. After a long silence, Qin finally uttered a word. "Kids nowadays are so fucking precocious." The next morning, Qin woke up from his sleep, felt the steady breathing of the beauty next to him, and gently got out of bed. After washing up, Qin came downstairs. Eva was busy in the kitchen at the moment. She was busy preparing breakfast for more than a dozen people. Qin felt a little distressed when he saw this. He walked up and gently put his arms around Eva's slender waist, rested his head on her shoulder, and felt the temperature of her body. He said softly, "Or I should go find a nanny. You work so hard every day. I feel bad for you." Eva leaned softly in Qin's arms. Hearing what he said, she chuckled twice. "Clean, so many women in the villa are idle. If you find a nanny, wouldn't that be a waste?" Turning her head and giving Qin a gentle good morning kiss, Eva continued. "Besides, except for being a little busy when cooking, everything else is fine. There is no need for a nanny." Qin thought about it and felt that what Eva said made sense. It was so good now. He could tease whoever he wanted. It would be so inconvenient to have a nanny. So he nodded gently. "Okay, then I'll listen to you." Eva snuggled happily in Qin's arms, thinking that such a life was actually really good. Of course, the premise is that she doesn't know what Kinzu is thinking, otherwise, he would probably pick up the kitchen knife next to him and chop him directly. After breakfast, Kinzu walked out of the villa, bringing the white tiger, and wandered around the ranch in the workers' fearful eyes. The workers didn't know what happened here the night before, and they were still working hard. Instead, they couldn't accept seeing Kinzu bringing a big tiger out. Before he had taken a few steps, Kinzu's cell phone rang, and as soon as he answered it, Lin Yu's complaining voice came over. "I say, Master Clean, can you walk a little further when you take a walk? Walking around the construction site with a leopard, do you still want the project to be completed as soon as possible?" Speaking of this, Lin Yu was so angry that she was still sleeping when she was woken up by a phone call from the person in charge of the construction site. It was said that the big boss was walking around the construction site with a leopard, and there was no rope around the leopard's neck. The workers' legs were shaking. How could they concentrate on working? Kinzu was a little confused by Lin Yu's barrage of questions. Leopard? When did he bring a leopard? He looked down at the white tiger at his feet. Okay, he understood. Ahem, well, Miss Lin, I have to correct you. I didn't bring a leopard, but a jaguar. There was silence on the other end of the phone. After a while, Lin Yu's somewhat exasperated voice came over. Master Clean, Landlord Clean, please beg me, no matter what you bring, can we stay away from the construction site? I still have to start work. Okay, I'll take a walk somewhere else, that's okay. Kinzu hung up the phone with a bit of a smile. Well, he couldn't move freely in his own territory. However, looking at the terrified workers, and then looking at the big tiger at his feet, which was almost 3 meters long, Kinzu did feel that he had gone too far. Come on, everyone, let's go to another place. Shaking his head, Kinzu turned and walked towards the dog with the confused white tiger. When they arrived at the dog, the fishermen here were obviously much better than the workers. At least they could still greet Kinzu normally. Simon even squatted down and stroked the white tiger's big head, which made the white tiger look at him a little depressed. Don't you know that you can't touch a woman's waist or a man's head? Chapter 521. Kinzu's arrogance. After looking around and not finding Will, Kinzu then remembered that Will seemed to be still in the hospital at this time. He turned around awkwardly and looked at Simon. Kinzu asked, "How is Will?" "I was busy yesterday and didn't have time to see him." Simon straightened up, looked at the sturdy and majestic jaguar, ignored its dissatisfied look, smacked his lips with envy, and then said, "It's okay, I just came back this morning. The bullet didn't hurt the bone. I just need to rest for a while." "That's good. Will is away these few days. You have to pay more attention to the dog, and be careful of anyone coming to attack you again." Simon nodded, his mouth slightly cracked, revealing 2 rows of white teeth, and he sneered, "Boss, don't worry about this. The dog is now watched 24 hours a day, and they are all armed. If anyone dares to come again, just shoot him, the son of a bitch." Patting Simon on the shoulder, Kinzu smiled with satisfaction. Very good, he's indeed a tough guy. After leisurely leaving the dock with the white tiger, Kinzu was also thinking about it. The coastline of his ranch is too long. If you just walk on foot, you may not be able to walk the whole way in more than an hour. Such a long coastline cannot be defended by Simon and a few others. Unless those people come directly to the dock like last time. What if they come directly to the villa? Kinzu felt a little chilled when he thought about it. Back at the villa, the little girl had already gotten up and was playing with a few little guys on the grass at the door. Brothers Dahu and Daha, perhaps because they all have spiritual energy, are no longer as hostile as they were at the beginning, and now they can play together. However, little Jerry and his wife climbed up the pine tree at the door, and no one knew what they were doing. The alligator snapping turtle, as always, lay by the pool basking in the sun, its 2 little eyes rolling around, looking pitifully at the vegetable field not far away. After being warned by Kinzu, he had not eaten delicious vegetables for several days. Now, every day when he wakes up, what he wants most is a small bite of delicious green vegetables. Thinking back to the days a few days ago when he was eating and throwing away, the alligator snapping turtle couldn't help licking his tongue, feeling so happy. Seeing Kinzu coming back, the little girl climbed up, ran to Kinzu, and stretched out her little hands to ask her uncle to hug her. Kinzu stretched out his hand and picked up the little girl, nodded her little head, and scolded. "Look at you, you're so dirty, just like a little muckball." Shirley was not scared by Kinzu's scolding. Instead, she leaned over her head, kissed Kinzu on the face, and said coquettishly with a smile, "Uncle is the best, Shirley wants to play." Kinzu pinched her pointed little nose helplessly. You just know how to play. He carried the little girl towards the villa, and the little guys behind him followed him, playing and playing, just like 4 little followers. Eva was packing things in the room. When she saw Kinzu come in, she asked with a smile. Clean, what have you done again? Link called and complained that you delayed their construction. Kinzu shrugged. It's nothing, I just took Bear to their construction site for a stroll. I swear, I just took a stroll and didn't do anything. Putchy. Eva couldn't help laughing and teased, is there anything else you need to do? Kinzu chuckled twice and did not make any excuses. He did go to show off. There was no other way. With such a mighty big guy, it was impossible not to show off. With a change of mind, Kinzu put the little girl down, took out his mobile phone, ran to the pergola and took a selfie with the big tiger, and then took a few selfies with the 2 little tigers. With a sly smile, he sat back on the sofa. Kinzu opened Penguin and logged in. He first showed off in the space, uploaded all the pictures, and added a line of text. I'm in close contact with a jaguar. Then he returned to the group and uploaded the short video directly. It was only 10 o'clock in the evening in China, and it was the busiest time in that group. Everyone was talking about mountains from all over the world. When the video was uploaded, the group was miraculously quiet for a few seconds, and then it was immediately flooded with messages. Wow, the local tyrant is out. This was the exclamation of passerby. The landlord king is out, everyone come and fight the local tyrant. This is the sigh of another passerby. Come and watch the rich man being chased by the tiger. This is the sigh of a passerby who did not see the video clearly. Bullshit, it's obviously the rich man who is chasing the tiger. Okay, well, rich man, please give me some tiger bones to replenish your body. This was the exclamation of a male classmate who had just got married. Kinzu took a look and found that it was a handsome boy in his class in college, and he had a good relationship with him. But I heard that after this guy graduated, he married a girl in the class who didn't have a good reputation. Although the woman was good looking, she changed boyfriends more frequently than she changed clothes. It seems that this guy was squeezed dry by the woman. Now not only is his eyesight blurry, but his body is also in bad shape. After looking around, Kinzu was surprised to find that none of the familiar animals showed up. What's going on? Have they already fallen asleep? It's unlikely. With the character of those animals, how could they go to bed before 12 o'clock? He looked through the chat history with some doubts, but he really didn't see it. After closing the penguin group, Kinzu realized that his private chat was almost blown up. Fuck, Kinzu, tell me the truth, is that photo photoshopped, and who photoshopped it? So realistic. This is the message from the eldest brother. Kinzu was happy. He guessed that this guy only saw the message in his own space and hadn't read the group message. Without saying much, Kinzu sent the video directly. The message from the second brother was much more direct than the eldest brother. Kinzu, send 2 pieces of tiger bones quickly. It would be even better if you can send the tiger whip as well. Kinzu was even more direct. He raised his middle finger and said, gun. The message from the 4th brother hasn't come yet, but Zumengyo's message came. Clean, is that a leopard? Kinzu was embarrassed. Sure enough, this is the difference between men and women. Men can recognize that it is a tiger at a glance, but few women can recognize it. Kinzu was not used to typing on his mobile phone, so he sent a video directly. Zumengyo answered the phone quickly, but after answering the phone, the first thing Kinzu heard was a shrill scream. Yo, do you want to die? Don't you know that I'm not wearing any clothes? A somewhat shameful shout came from the video. Thank you for the reward from Gailong. Today is another dog abuse day. My friends, have you been abused? Chapter 522 Female Slave. As the screen shook, a white shadow flashed in front of Kinzu's eyes. Then, Zumengyo's awkward apology came from the video. After a while, the video returned to normal. Zumengyo complained with a red face. It's all your fault. Now it's over. I'm going to be scolded to death by Ruhi. Kinzu swallowed his saliva. Was that Surui just now? Zumengyo looked at Kinzu's lustful expression and snorted in dissatisfaction. What's wrong? Do you think you didn't see it carefully? Do you want me to show it to you again? Kinzu was about to nod his head. This must be possible. But when he looked up, he saw Zumengyo's murderous eyes. The words on his lips were swallowed back. Well, I didn't see it, okay? I was just wondering who that woman was. Why did her voice sound a little familiar? Really? Zhu Mengyo looked at Qinzhu with some doubt. It's more real than real gold. Qinzhu raised his palm and swore. This time he really didn't lie, he really didn't see it clearly just now. Well, I just know that she has a good figure, very white and very big. Okay, I believe you. Zhu Mengyo pouted her little mouth, showing an expression that said you know what's best for you. Qinzhu wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and quickly changed the subject. Yo, why is Surui at your place? You're not here, I'm bored living alone, and Rui is alone anyway, so I asked her to come and keep me company. Blinking her big eyes, Zhu Mengyo asked, what kind of leopard is that? Why does it look a little weird? Ha, it's not a leopard, of course it looks weird. Qinzhu walked out of the villa, asked the white tiger to come over to watch the video, touched its soft fur, and said with a smile, look, this doesn't look like a leopard at all, it's an authentic jaguar. Zhu Mengyo looked at it for a long time, but couldn't tell what it was. She supported her head with her little hands and muttered, it looks like a leopard no matter how you look at it, except that it's a little stronger than an ordinary leopard. Qinzhu was a little speechless. Well, it was all in vain. There was no way. Back at the villa, Qinzhu began to analyze the differences between leopards and tigers with Zhu Mengyo very seriously. Surui, who had wanted to eavesdrop, was depressed. What kind of people were these two? They didn't talk about what they loved to do in the video, but talked about tigers and leopards instead. Qinzhu was introducing them with saliva flying, when a crisp voice came from behind him. Master, good morning, good morning. Qinzhu was startled and almost dropped his phone on the ground. He looked back at the little parrot next to him and cursed angrily. You walk without making any sound. After cursing, he remembered that the parrot really walked without making any sound. He picked up the phone angrily, and then found that Zhu Mengyo's face on the other side was a little wrong. He asked in confusion, Mengyo, what's wrong with you? Zhu Mengyo bit her small broken teeth and repeated word by word, Master, good morning. Qinzhu didn't react when he heard this, and smiled and said, don't mention it, it scared me. By the way, let's continue talking about tigers. Before he could finish, he was interrupted by a delicate shout. Qinzhu, explain to me clearly why she calls you master. Zhu Mengyo looked at Qinzhu angrily, and the anger in her heart could no longer be suppressed. Qinzhu was a little stunned. What is this? If it doesn't call me master, what should it call me? Before he could react, he saw another little head popping out of the video screen, and Surui's angry voice also came out. Okay, Qinzhu, I didn't expect you to be this kind of person. You even raised a female slave. You are too much. Surui, who originally felt a little boring, didn't expect to hear such explosive news at the last minute, so she rushed out. This result directly led to a snow white in Qinzhu's eyes. Well, white like snowflakes, a large piece of snow white, and there was a small plum blossom in it. After swallowing his saliva, Qinzhu's mind was blank, and he murmured, I really didn't mean to look at it. Do you want to give me benefits like this? But when he heard what Surui said clearly, he almost jumped up in fright, and his face turned green. What the hell? Slave girl? What's the connection? Surui also heard Qinzhu's murmur clearly, looked down at herself, and screamed again. Zhu Mengyo was watching from the side, but she was a little dazed. Things were moving too fast, and she couldn't keep up with the pace. After a chaos, the video finally returned to normal. Zhu Mengyo looked at Qinzhu with a bad face, waiting for his explanation. Although women always say that explanation is a cover-up, if you really don't explain, you will really have to kneel down. So Qinzhu was very tactful. Looking at Zhu Mengyo's eyes, he quickly explained, well, yo, I really didn't see it. Zhu Mengyo snorted coldly, turned her head and rolled her eyes at her best friend. Now it's okay, she was still taken advantage of by this bad guy. Surui was so wrong, her face flushed with shame. She just listened to some gossip, why did she get herself involved? Seeing that Qinzhu wanted to continue, she couldn't help it anymore and shouted. Qinzhu, Yo asked you to explain what happened to the slave girl, don't talk about it. Surui said this, Zhu Mengyo came back to her senses. Yes, let's find out what happened to the master first. Looking at the two beautiful faces in the video, Qinzhu was sweating in his heart. What are they talking about? What slave girl? Just at this moment, Heidi's crisp voice rang again. Master, master, guests are coming, guests are coming. Qinzhu turned his head and saw that it was old John who came in with a small bucket. Wait. Master. Qinzhu finally realized what the problem was. He gestured to old John and grabbed Heidi with tears in his eyes. Looking at the two women whose faces were getting darker and darker in the video, Kinzu said with some grief and indignation, "This is the female slave you were talking about." The two women looked at the colorful birds on the screen, and their anger rose in their hearts. "Are you making fun of us, sisters?" Seeing that the two women didn't believe it, Kinzu became a little anxious. This was not a trivial matter and he had to make it clear. Putting the phone on the coffee table, Kinzu poked Heidi's little head with one hand. "You little troublemaker, hurry up and speak to me. What is terrible will happen. I don't know if this guy did it on purpose." Now he is playing silence with Kinzu, blinking his big eyes and not speaking. "Clean, you actually used a bird to deceive me. You wait, I'm going to book a plane ticket." Zumengyo looked at Kinzu, who was still pretending, said a cruel word, and got up to book a plane ticket. "The Dogabu's festival is finally over. I'm full, and I'm looking for comfort." Si estes escuchando esta novela on canal distinto mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sinisfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 523. Heidi fainted. Kinzu was sweating. Why was this little temper so impatient? Looking down at Heidi, who was pretending to be dead in his hand, Kinzu gritted his teeth and whispered, "1 drop of spiritual liquid." Heidi's eyes lit up and she shook her head gently. 5 drops. 2 drops. Kinzu's eyes flashed with ferocity. 5 drops. Heidi shrank her neck and turned her head to the video. Zumengyo had already stood up. Kinzu was so angry. "You little thing, you know how to take the opportunity to make conditions. 3 drops, if you don't agree, I will crush you to death now. 5, deal." Heidi's body trembled violently, and the words on her lips changed immediately. "HMPH, you're smart, speak to me quickly." With a smug smile, Kinzu lifted Heidi to the front of the video again. At this time, Zumengyo had already turned on the computer and was checking their tickets online. Surui was holding her mobile phone and looking at Kinzu with gritted teeth. "This bastard, he got a good deal today. When I get to Boston, I will kill him." Just as I was thinking about how to deal with Kinzu, I heard the unknown woman's voice in the video again. "Hi, beautiful lady, I'm Heidi, the master's most beloved Heidi." The bedroom was not big to begin with, and the phone was on speaker, so Zumengyo next to him heard this ambiguous sentence very clearly. Bang. After slamming the keyboard hard, Zumengyo stood up with a red face. "You vixen, you're going too far. I'm going to fight you today. You come and see." Surui stared at the screen and stammered. Zumengyo threw herself on the bed. "Humph, I want to see what this vixen looks like." Before she finished speaking, she saw the colorful bird in the mobile phone video flapping its wings, its mouth opening and closing, and a pleasant voice came again. "Hello, hostess. I'm Heidi. Please take care of me. It's our first meeting." With her mouth wide open, Zumengyo stared at her phone stupidly, unable to utter a word. Surui next to her reacted now and asked impatiently, "You said your name is Heidi. Why are you talking?" Heidi stood on the coffee table, scratched her head with her wings, and said in confusion, "Heidi doesn't know either. Why can Heidi talk?" At this time, Kinzu stretched out his hand and Heidi jumped up obediently, looking so docile and cute. However, on the side that cannot be seen in the video, the little guy's mouth opened and closed, reminding Kinzu. 3 drops. Rolling his eyes, Kinzu flicked the little girl's head with his hand, and scolded with a smile. "You fooded, you can't do without you." Looking at the 2 stupid women in the video, Kinzu shrugged his shoulders and said helplessly, "You guys, what do you think about all day? Female slaves, you can think of it." As soon as the voice fell, the 2 women who were still a little dazed, their faces flushed all the way to their necks. "Well, you guys chat, I'll leave first." Surui fled to the side in a somewhat embarrassed manner, secretly annoyed in her heart. Today's loss is a bit big. Not only was someone taking advantage of her, but this face is about to be humiliated. Especially when thinking of the scene that appeared in her mind just now, Surui wanted to buy a piece of tofu and kill herself. Could it be that she has watched too many movies recently and has a little bit of that? Surui escaped completely, but Zumengyo suffered. Facing Qinzyu's teasing eyes, the little girl's neck was red all the way down, and she lowered her head and stammered, not knowing what to say. Recalling her first reaction, Zhu Mengyo rolled her eyes at her bestie next to her. It was this guy who said to learn more experience, and that men like experienced women. Now, she didn't learn any experience, but her thoughts were a little advanced. Qinzyu also knew when to stop. Seeing that Zhu Mengyo was embarrassed to speak, he smiled and asked, "Mengyo, do you know what kind of bird this is?" Hearing this, Zhu Mengyo looked up and looked at Heidi carefully, but still shook her head. She didn't know much about these flowers and birds. "This is a parrot, a macaw, the smartest and fastest parrot in the world." Qinzyu proudly introduced the seabed in his hand. As if knowing that Qinzyu was praising himself, the seabed, which had been well behaved, spread its wings and shook them vigorously, looking so majestic that people wanted to laugh. "Is this a macaw?" Zhu Mengyo didn't laugh, but looked at the little parrot on Qinzyu's arm with some surprise, and asked in confusion, "Qin, isn't it said that macaws are 1 meter long? Is yours a baby bird? How can a baby bird be so smart?" Qinzyu shook his head, touched the little guy's feathers, and said with a smile, "Yo, you are just a kind of macaw. There is a kind of macaw that can grow to more than 1 meter in length, but it's not my kind." Zhu Mengyo nodded as if she understood, and asked curiously, "Where did you get it? Did you buy it?" Qinzyu hesitated for a moment. "Can this be true?" "Obviously not." "Well, isn't there a forest next to my villa? I don't know what happened to the corner of my mouth. There are many more animals, parrots and jaguars are found there." "Ah? The tiger ran into the ranch? Are you okay?" Zhu Mengyo was shocked when she heard that the tiger ran to the side of the villa. "Of course, it's okay. You forgot that there are guns on the ranch," Qinzyu said and made a shooting gesture. Heidi, who was standing next to him, listened for a long time and felt that what the master said seemed to be right. He was picked up by him in the woods. But she felt something was wrong, and her little head was a little confused for a while. After chatting for a while, Zhu Mengyo felt a little sleepy, yawned a little, and said goodnight to Qinzyu in a daze. It was not until the video was hung up that Qinzyu was relieved. This feeling of being caught cheating at any time was really exciting. Putting away the phone, Qinzyu looked at Heidi on the coffee table, rubbed his hands, and a grim smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. "Master, what do you want to do?" Heidi saw that the situation was not good, and immediately flapped her wings and wanted to escape from the scene. However, although it can fly, can it beat Qinzyu who was prepared in advance? So Qinzyu easily held the little guy in his hand. "Little thing, you are quite courageous. You dared to threaten your master." Qinzyu poked the little guy's head with his finger and sneered. "Do you think I should steam you, braise you, or fry you?" Heidi was so frightened by Qinzyu's words that she trembled all over. She trembled even more when she thought of herself being stripped naked and lying on the plate. Just when Qinzyu wanted to continue to scare it and teach it a lesson, the little guy tilted his head and made a sound of Chapter 524. The calf is too greedy. Qinzyu was a little dumbfounded. What happened? Was he scared to death? He quickly used his hand to check. Fortunately, there was still a heartbeat. "Damn, this kid, he is too frightened, isn't he?" Qinzyu grumbled a few words in frustration, and carefully placed the little guy on the coffee table. Just as he wanted to get a drop of spiritual liquid to treat the little guy, Qinzyu suddenly remembered that old John was still watching. Turning around, looking at John's stunned expression, Qinzyu smiled awkwardly. "Well, old John, why are you here so early today?" Awakened by Qinzyu's voice, old John wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. His boss really knows how to play. "Nothing, boss, the first bucket of milk from the ranch, I'll bring it to you to try." As he said that, old John raised a small wooden bucket in his hand. "Oh? The cows are producing milk?" Qinzyu was a little surprised. Old John wiped his sweat again, hesitated for a moment, and said, "Boss, the cow has produced milk a long time ago, but this time the calf seems a little abnormal." "Oh? Why is it abnormal?" Qinzyu sat up straight, a little nervous. Old John waved his hand, signaling Qinzyu not to be nervous, and explained, "This calf's appetite is a little too big. Maybe it's because it's the first time. The cow's milk is relatively small, and it's not enough for the calf to drink." Qinzyu was a little dumbfounded, isn't it? He has checked it specifically. Under normal circumstances, the daily milk production of dairy cows is about 20 to 45 kilograms. Now old John actually told him that a cow can't feed a calf. "Yes, boss, it's just enough for the calf." Old John shrugged, once again confirming that Kinzu did not hear wrong. Is this normal? Kinzu asked uncertainly. Maybe, it should be, normal. Old John scratched his head. Not to mention Kinzu, even he, an old cowboy, is a little unsure now. Kinzu rolled his eyes at this guy. Is there any difference between what you said and what you said in vain? What are you doing? Kinzu pointed to the small wooden barrel on the ground, a little confused. Old John looked at the small wooden barrel, carried it over, put the barrel on the coffee table, and opened it. This is because the calf has started to eat grass now, so we can squeeze milk, otherwise how can we get our share? Kinzu looked at the milky white milk in the small wooden barrel, smelled the milk fragrance with a hint of fishy smell, and frowned. Seeing Kinzu frowning, Old John shrugged and smiled. Unprocessed milk does not smell very good. Kinzu nodded, covered the milk, and asked hesitantly, Old John, do you think we should take the calf for a checkup? Checkup? Old John hesitated. He wanted to say that it was nothing, wasn't it just a bigger appetite? But he didn't dare to be completely sure. After all, he had been a cowboy for so many years and he had never encountered such a situation. So he hesitated and said, Boss, then I will take the calf to Revere for a checkup this afternoon. Revere? Kinzu muttered to himself. Revere gave him the impression that it was just a small town in China. What could a doctor in a small town find out? Looking at Old John with some curiosity, Kinzu asked, Where did you go for checkups before? Why? Old John was stunned for a moment, shrugged his shoulders, and said with a smile, We're veterinarians ourselves. We treat minor illnesses ourselves. If we can't treat major illnesses, we simply don't treat them. Is that okay? Of course. Old John nodded, spread his hands, and said helplessly, Boss, you don't know that the guys in the veterinary station are simply vampires. The price of a visit is not as good as slaughtering the cow directly. After hearing what Old John said, Kinzu was even more worried about letting the calf go to Revere. If he was cheated by those guys again, his rare breed of cattle would be scrapped. Just as he was thinking, he heard footsteps nearby. Mobica and Diva walked downstairs one after another. Coincidentally, when Mobica was walking downstairs, he heard what Old John said, and asked in confusion, Clean, do you want to find a veterinarian? What's wrong? Are the cows on the ranch sick? Kinzu nodded, Yes, there is something wrong with a calf, and I want to find someone to take a look. Hearing this, Mobica said worriedly, Then we have to see it quickly. Do we need to find a veterinarian? Although the veterinarian in Revere is a little dark, his skills are still good. Kinzu shook his head, I plan to ask David to help me find a famous veterinarian and have him come to the ranch to see it. Is it necessary? Mobica was a little dumbfounded. Not to mention her, even Old John next to him swallowed his saliva. It shouldn't be for a calf, right? Seeing their surprised expressions, Kinzu smiled and waved his hands. You don't know, this calf is more important to the ranch. It is a new breed of cattle that has been bred. What? A new breed of cattle? The three people stood up at the same time. The three exclamations that suddenly sounded beside him actually scared Kinzu, and he looked at the three people with some confusion. Yes, what's wrong? What's wrong? Old John was a little excited, his face flushed, and he looked at Kinzu with an expression of unacceptability. Boss, do you know what a new breed of cattle represents? Kinzu shook his head, a little confused. Isn't it just a new breed of cattle? It's still a dairy cow, and it's not sure whether the milk produced at the time can be drunk or not. Old John looked at Kinzu with some regret, and explained. The birth of a new breed of cattle represents infinite possibilities. If you can breed a top-quality one, you don't have to worry about the rest of your life. Kinzu curled his lips, and I don't have to worry about the rest of my life now. As if he had sensed Kinzu's thoughts, Old John suddenly shrank like a deflated ball. Kinzu patted Old John's shoulder comfortingly, picked up the phone from the side, and was about to call David. Mobica, who was standing next to him, came back to his senses from his surprise, and after understanding Kinzu's thoughts, he suddenly suggested, Clean, if that's the case, you can find Onid, she is studying biology. Onid. Kinzu put down the phone in his hand and looked at Mobica with some doubts. Is Onid okay? Isn't she researching a project? Mobica nodded, Yeah, no problem, I heard her say a few days ago that the research project has reached a deadlock, and they are now on vacation by the professor. Kinzu was immediately happy when he heard this, and waved his hand and said, Okay, then you call Onid and ask her to come over. Chapter 525 Found someone. When Mobica went to make a phone call, Kinzu waved at Eva and said with a smile, "Come, heat up this milk, let's try our own milk." Eva nodded with a smile, and went to the kitchen with a small wooden bucket. After Eva left, Kinzu lay on the sofa and asked with a smile, "Old John, besides eating more, does the calf have any other abnormalities?" "Other abnormalities?" Old John thought about it and said thoughtfully, "Now that you mention it, there are some." "Oh? What else?" Kinzu frowned. Old John said uncertainly, "In addition to eating more, the calf seems to grow faster." Seeing Kinzu frowning, Old John explained awkwardly, "Boss, because there are no other calves at the same time, I really didn't notice it if you didn't say it." As he was talking, Eva came over with a few cups of milk with a rich milky aroma. Putting the milk on the coffee table, Eva asked in confusion, "Boss, what kind of milk is this? Why does it smell better than other milk?" "Oh? Really?" Kinzu heard this and temporarily put aside other thoughts. He picked up a cup of thick white milk and put it under his nose to sniff carefully. "I don't know if it's psychological. Anyway, Kinzu also feels that the milk in the cup is more fragrant than the milk he usually drinks." "Well, it's indeed a little different. Maybe it's because we haven't had fresh milk for a long time." "No, boss." Old John shook his head, sniffed in confusion, and objected. "It's not that it feels fragrant because we haven't drunk it for a long time, but it is indeed more fragrant than the milk we've drank before." Kinzu became interested and asked curiously, "Are you sure?" "Of course." Old John patted his chest. "I'm an old cowboy for so many years. If I can't even tell whether the milk is good or not, it would be a joke." Kinzu thought about it and it was true. After all, he was an old cowboy for decades, and it was impossible for him to be confused about this matter. That means that the milk produced by his own ranch is indeed much better. It's just a pity. Old John shook his head. "What's wrong?" Kinzu was stunned. "There are too few dairy cows producing milk on our ranch now." Old John sighed with some regret. "If there were more cows, we could just call someone to buy them, and the price would definitely not be low." Kinzu smiled and waved his hand. "It's nothing, we have to take it slowly, we can't become fat at one bite." After a pause, taking a sip of fresh milk with a strong milky aroma, Kinzu continued, "Besides, don't we already have so many dairy cows now? As long as they give birth to calves, wouldn't that be great?" "That's true." Old John also smiled when he heard it. "Now several of them are about to give birth. It won't be long before we can ensure the self-sufficiency of the ranch." Kinzu shrugged, smiled and teased, "This depends on you, Old John. You should let them exercise more, especially the bulls. You must not let them idle. Aren't these guys kept for this job?" "Okay, as you wish. I'll let them exercise when I go back." Old John's expression did not change at all. Instead, he felt that what Kinzu said made sense. Looking at the old man sitting on the sofa opposite, Kinzu sighed in his heart. This guy cares more about the ranch than himself. It is really his luck to have his help. After sending Old John away, Kinzu sat back on the sofa, picked up his phone, and personally confirmed the time of coming with on it. Kinzu originally wanted to pick her up in New York, but she declined, saying that a friend was coming here, and she came with the car. After Kinzu hung up the phone, he began to think in his heart, friends? Male or female? If Onid knew what Kinzu was thinking at this time, she would probably fly directly over to give him a good beating. Is there such a person who doesn't trust people? Unfortunately, she didn't know, so she was still talking to others excitedly on the phone. After agreeing on the departure time, she hummed a little tune and watched TV happily. In the evening, the sunset gradually set, and the night rose quietly. Kinzu returned to the bedroom, changed into a black casual outfit, and under the somewhat uneasy gaze of the two beauties, he drove his Nive the 15th and left the villa in the night. Eva and Mobica stood on the balcony on the second floor, watching the car go away, feeling a little uneasy. "Sister Eva, will everything be all right?" Mobica looked at Eva next to her with a worried look. Although Eva was also worried, she still patted Mobica's shoulder and comforted her softly. "Don't worry, Keen will be all right with Dale here." Hearing Dale's name, the two girls seemed to have found some confidence and relaxed a little. Just when the two were worried, Kinzu drove the Night the 15th to an abandoned factory in the suburbs of Revere. As soon as the Night the 15th stopped, the doors opened from the outside, and Dale, who was dressed in black casual clothes, sat in the passenger seat. "How is it? Did you find the person?" Kinzu looked at Dale, who was wearing a black casual suit and looked mysterious and seductive, with some curiosity. Just this afternoon, he finally received a call from Dale, and the two agreed to meet here in the evening, so this scene happened. Dale closed the car door and gestured to the front. "You can drive in directly from here." Kinzu did not hesitate at all, pulled his hand and restarted the car. The huge roar of the engine seemed a bit harsh in this quiet suburb. It's just a pity that the United States is too big. Even if this is a small town, there are not many people living there. So, until Kinzu drove into the factory, stopped the car and turned off the engine, no one noticed any unusual movement here. "Boss, get down, I've locked the people upstairs." Dale pushed open the car door and got out. Kinzu nodded, opened the car door and got out of the car. This should be an abandoned factory with a large area, but there are a lot of construction waste piled up inside, which looks a bit dirty. What surprised Kinzu was that such an abandoned factory was actually powered on, and several large light bulbs illuminated the surroundings very brightly. Dale did not speak, gestured to the side, and took the lead to walk inside. Kinzu did not ask any more questions, and followed her footsteps and walked upstairs. After going up to the second floor, Dale opened a room. The space inside was large and the lights were on. The only difference was that in this room, there was a man with his mouth sealed with tape, who was looking at the two of them with a look of horror. Finde est caption much as great as Pelaga hasta el final. No esse olvident all like busgasms contendo exclusivo ixo in medito. Suscribita news to Patreon. Recuerda, card alike, suscription o donaking nos anima a continue. Great as a todos nos vemos en el próximo video.